Chapter 595. Young master, please accept this subordinate's bow. This subordinate was rude before. Chun Guanshuan suddenly took a deep breath and walked out of the ranks. He bowed deeply in front of Wang Chong. Behind him, all the highest-level generals of the Annam Protectorate also bowed. They raised their heads and gazed at Wang Chong, their eyes brimming with astonishment, admiration, and deep respect. The generals of the southwest had all heard of Meng Shizhao's White Elephant Corps. This was an army that Jelifeng regarded with great importance, and it was also a force with terrifying combat power. All of them had personally witnessed the previous battle, but no one had expected that while everyone was still half acquainted with the elephants that lived in Irai, only knowing a few scraps of their claws, Wang Chong had already thought of a way to easily defeat them. This sort of ability was simply miraculous, surpassing everyone's imagination. Young master, can you tell us how you knew that these giant beasts are afraid of sound? Lin Wuxia stepped forward, his face full of admiration. If they had known this method of dealing with the White Elephant Corps in the Battle of Irai, everything would have been completely different. At the very least, they wouldn't have been trampled to death by the charge of those giant elephants. Although Wang Chong had resided in the capital for a long time and rarely left, his vast knowledge and wisdom had already reached a level that others could only sigh in amazement at. Haha, this isn't that hard to guess. These giant elephants have very large bodies, but their eyes are inconceivably small, just a bit larger than normal humans. It's clear that their eyes are their weak point. Since their eyes are like this, their other senses might also be like this. So I thought of their ears. Wang Chong held his hands behind his back and faintly chuckled. No matter what, the memories of a soul from another world could never be spoken of in this world. Young master's extraordinary talent is truly formidable. The top-class generals of the Annam Protectorate were all astonished. Although Wang Chong spoke briefly about it, in the eyes of the crowd, this was completely his normal behavior. As for Wang Chong's age, it was completely ignored. Although the attack had stopped, the matter of the White Elephant Corps was far from over. The berserk elephants rampaged through the crowd, and the losses suffered by the White Elephant Corps in this battle were almost entirely caused by the berserk elephants. At least 2,000 to 3,000 people were killed by the rampaging elephants. Even so, the White Elephant Corps still had to think of a way to pacify these rampaging elephants. Without elephants, the White Elephant Corps couldn't be called a White Elephant Corps. Your Majesty, what should we do next? Should we send other armies? Your Majesty, let me go. I am willing to lead the army to destroy the Tang people. In the middle of Meng Shizhao's army, several generals were extremely excited and wanted to join the battle. Let's call it a day. Jelifeng let out a long sigh, a rare look of exhaustion appearing in the eyes of this ambitious and ruthless character. The defeat of the Whitestone Corps, and then the defeat of the White Elephant Corps, which he had placed his hopes on, had left a deep shadow in the heart of the Meng Shizhao Emperor. 70,000 to 80,000 soldiers had died in battle. Generals, there is no need to talk about fighting. Wait until I see the Prime Minister of Uzan, and have some ideas before making a decision. Yes, Your Majesty. The generals bowed their heads in greeting. In Irai, Jelifeng's status was similar to that of the Holy Emperor of the Tang dynasty. Her words were law. Any order, no matter what, would be thoroughly carried out. In addition, how are General Duan's injuries? Jelifeng asked. General Duan's injuries have already stabilized, a Meng Shizhao general said. A Meng Shizhao general said, knowing that Jelifeng was speaking of Duan Wuzong. I'll go see him as well. With a wave of his sleeve, Jelifeng left the center of the army. As he left, the long blare of a horn came from the southeast. The vast Uzan army retreated from the mountain where the Tang people resided like the receding tide. Meng Shizhao also tacitly retreated. For a moment, a large area around the mountain where the Tang people resided had been emptied. Young master, they've retreated. Old Eagle suddenly spoke as he looked down from the summit, amid the blustery winds. It's about time for them to retreat. Wang Chong glanced up at the darkening sky and sneered. The siege of the city, the rain of fireballs, the White Elephant Corps. The Mengshi, Yusang army had used at least 3 or 4 waves of attacks in a single day, but they had all been thwarted. If you know to retreat at a time like this, it's not too late. Dalawan Ruozhen, Huashu Wuzong, and Jelifeng were all influential figures of the Southwest, people on the same level as Zhangqiu Jinxiong. All of them had to be looked up to. If anyone else had said these words like Wang Chong, they would have been snorted in contempt. But when Wang Chong said these words, no one felt that there was anything wrong with them. He had already used his actions to amply prove that he had the strength and qualifications to say these words. Not even the generals of the Annam Protectorate had realized that Wang Chong's position in their hearts had already surpassed that of Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong, who had been fighting a life-and-death battle with them for more than a month. Pass on my order. The army is to turn on the stoves and start cooking. But young master, what if they use this chance to attack? The eagle said. If they dare. With a cold laugh, Wang Chong flicked his sleeves and turned to leave. This kind of tactic was meant to force them to attack, and Wang Chong was more than happy to see them attack at this moment. This is blatant contempt. That child is mocking us. As smoke rose from the top of the mountain, Huashu Wuzong suddenly spoke, his gaze on Dalawan Ruozhen. His meaning was clear. Rather than saying that Wang Chong was mocking the Uzhen, it would be more accurate to say that he was provoking Dalawan Ruozhen. What can I do? My skills are inferior. Dalawan Ruozhen smiled bitterly. Ha! You'll admit defeat? Huashu Wuzong had a look of disbelief on his face. Huashu Wuzong could not be more familiar with this prime minister of the Ngari royal lineage. Anyone who thought that Wang Chong would really admit defeat would be gravely mistaken. Those people who believed that Dalawan Ruozhen would easily concede had been reduced to a pile of yellow mud in the past few days. At the very least, if Zhangqiu Jinxiong was around and saw this expression on Dalawan Ruozhen's face, he would definitely raise his guard. However, this kid really can't be underestimated. Even when Zhangqiu Jinxiong was around, he wouldn't have been able to force me to this extent. Dalawan Ruozhen's brows furrowed deeply at this last sentence. Huashu Wuzong also fell silent. Having worked with Dalawan Ruozhen for many years, he couldn't be any more familiar with Dalawan Ruozhen. There was no doubt that Dalawan Ruozhen was speaking from the bottom of his heart. To be able to receive such an evaluation from Dalawan Ruozhen, Wang Chong should be proud of himself. Dusk fell and the sky darkened. The entire battlefield had sunk into silence, with only the torches burning in the darkness, their glow like stars. At this time, the Tang people, Mengshi Zhao's people, and Uzhen's people were living in harmony, a rare moment of peace. Buzz! In the darkest hours of the night, no one noticed that several figures had silently appeared on the northwest side of the mountain. This is the place. A figure with two sabers sheathed on his back stood at Dalawan Ruozhen's side. It was the fierce Uzhen General Tumi Sangza, as well as Longkimba and Siren Xiangxiong. All of them had solemn expressions on their faces. The Prime Minister had never done anything meaningless, and he certainly wouldn't do such a thing now. Just what is this kid doing? Siren Xiangxiong slowly raised his head, looking from the base of the mountain all the way to the summit. This was a long passage, around 10 samzhong long. Unlike the other parts of the mountain, there were no steel walls here, only tens of thousands of caltrops of various sizes. The largest of these caltrops were 4 to 5 feet tall, while the smallest were only the size of a thumb, but all of them were covered in sharp thorns. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions, of these caltrops were pouring down from the summit, forming a black river of thorns that was as straight as a waterfall. This river of thorns was particularly striking amidst the walls of the mountain. Could it be that they don't have enough materials, that they don't have enough steel walls? An officer of the Uzhen tribe asked in shock. Impossible. Just look at how many thorns there are here. With so many materials, wouldn't the steel walls be enough to fill up this passage? Longkimba coldly said. He was basically the only one left of the 5 tiger generals. The others were all valiant generals of the tribe like Siren Xiangxiong and Tumi Sangza. But even so, not even Tumi Sangza dared to offend Longkimba too much. As the leader of the 5 tiger generals, Longkimba was an extremely valiant existence. Since that's the case, there must be a problem here. That brat probably wants to use this place to do something. Siren Xiangxiong suddenly said. It would be strange if there wasn't a problem with this abrupt river of thorns. Tumi Sangza, can you use your halo to turn all these halos into metal men and get rid of them? Dalawan Ruozan suddenly said, a profound look in his eyes. I can, but it won't be very easy. A troubled look appeared in Tumi Sangza's eyes. These thorns, large and small, are almost all covered in toughening inscriptions. With so many thorns, the number of metal men I can make with my abilities is extremely limited, and it will consume an enormous amount of stellar energy. And if I use metal men to clean them up, the metal men don't have bodies and won't be affected by the thorns, but the noise will also alarm the Tang people on the mountain. Moreover, there are far too many of these thorns. My abilities are probably very limited. Chapter 596. Metal element ability users were not invincible. In his battle with Luoji, Lin Wushu, and Chen Guanshuan, Tumi Sangza had consumed a great deal of his stellar energy. Moreover, summoning the metal giants consumed stellar energy. His strength was simply not enough to clear away these hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of metal brambles. Even if he summoned 100-some metal men, he still wouldn't be able to accomplish this arduous task. Dalawan Ruozan silently raised his head to the summit, countless thoughts flitting through his mind. Although he couldn't see anything in the pitch-black darkness, Dalawan Ruozan suddenly saw that figure standing motionlessly on the summit, seemingly plotting something. In all his years at the helm of the Ngari royal lineage, and 10-some years of fighting with Zhangqiu Jinxiong, Dalawan Ruozan had never found anyone so unfathomable. At every moment, his opponent seemed to be plotting something. This caused Dalawan Ruozan to fall into a daze, as if he was seeing another version of himself. Truly a formidable foe, Dalawan Ruozan muttered to himself. After a few moments of silence, Dalawan Ruozan turned to Longkimba. Are you ready? Replying to Prime Minister, we're ready. All 5,000 warhorses have been wrapped in the cloth provided by Mengshi Zhao. Longkimba sternly said. Very good. Then let's begin. Dalawan Ruozan firmly said, his eyes turning cold and piercing. War was never limited to the day. Night was also a fierce battlefield. But unlike the day, without the visibility of the day, the Annam Protectorate's defensive capabilities would be greatly reduced. Dalawan Ruozan had specially chosen the middle of the night, when people were the most sleepy, to prepare for his assault on the camp. Boom! Dalawan Ruozan had just given the order, when there was a massive boom from the southwest. Flames soared into the sky and battle cries filled the air. Looking from afar, one could vaguely see an army rampaging inside, wantonly slaughtering. Report. Almost at the same time, a warhorse galloped forward. An Uzun herald rushed over, looking travel-worn. Prime Minister, Mengshi Zhao's people are under attack. The Tang people have raided the camp in the middle of the night. As soon as these words came out, everyone's expressions suddenly became incomparably interesting. When they thought of robbing the Tang people's camp, the Tang people robbed the Mengshi Zhao's camp first. What's going on? Don't tell me that Mengshi Zhao's people aren't prepared? Dalawan Ruozan said with a hint of anger. Jelifeng was also an ambitious and ruthless powerhouse of the southwest. It would have been one thing if others had been on guard against this kind of mistake, but how could he have made the same mistake? No, the people from the Annam Protectorate are wearing our Uzun armor. The messenger said hurriedly. Swish. These words caused Longkimba, Tumi Sangza, Siren Xiangxiong, and even Dalawan Ruozan to instantly grimace, all of them grimacing. Damn it! Longkimba fiercely clenched his fists, his face ghastly pale. This was not the first time he had clashed with Wang Chong, so he didn't need to think too much to know that this was Wang Chong's plan. It was one thing for this bastard to raid the camp, but he had even disguised himself as them. Mengshi Zhao must have misunderstood their identities, allowing Wang Chong to successfully raid the camp. Bang! While the generals were still reeling from the sudden change in Mengshi Zhao's army, there was another explosion and a roar that shook the heavens. But this time, the sound did not come from Mengshi Zhao's camp, but from the mountains behind them. Kill! Capture the Uzun! Don't let them escape! Young master already had a plan. Raiding our camp is nothing but wishful thinking. As the voices came from the mountains, both Dalawan Ruozan, and the other generals grimaced. We've been tricked. Everyone was looking at Dalu and Ruozan, but none of them said a word. Ha ha ha, young master. These fellows really did take the bait. On the summit, in the darkness of the night, the generals roared with laughter as they looked up and down the mountain at the two blazing torches. A strong point is a weak point, and a strong point is a weak point. If Dalu and Ruozan wants to use the methods of raiding camps he learned from the Central Plains to deal with the Tang dynasty, then I can only say that he's found the wrong person. Wang Chong looked down the mountain, a faint smile on his face. Although he couldn't see anything, Wang Chong was sure that Dalu and Ruozan's expression must be very interesting at this moment. Uzan did not know any military strategy, although the Great Snow Mountain Temple had a transcendent status and was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. In terms of military strategy, it was just a barren land. The Central Plains had always been a land of military strategy, compared with the military strategy culture that had been accumulated for thousands of years in the Central Plains. Even the Great Snow Mountain Temple was not worth mentioning. As expected of a prime minister who likes to raid camps at night, Wang Chong couldn't help but laugh in his heart. It was no secret to Wang Chong that Dalu and Ruozan liked to raid camps at night. At this time, it was already quite good to have this kind of idea of raiding camps. Unfortunately, his opponent was Wang Chong. Wang Chong was only on guard against him. He didn't expect that Dalu and Ruozan would really be tricked and send people to raid the camp. Click on the profile picture, and you'll find it in the history. Smiley face. How was it? Wang Chong asked. Following young master's orders, we prepared ballistae and set up an ambush. The vast majority of them were killed by us. Less than 1,000 managed to escape, a commander reported. One of the generals who passed the order said, "That's enough. Let them go. In addition, have the Izan and Mengxizhao soldiers who died in battle during the day collect their armor. Although we've already used this move before, as long as the Mengxi Yusang army remains, we can still use it." "Yes, young master." The messenger quickly turned and left. In the battle during the day, 60 to 70,000 soldiers had died on the mountain. In this era, many armies would choose to bury these corpses, push them down the mountain, or abandon them somewhere else. But to Wang Chong, these corpses were still things that he could use. Although the Annam Protectorate could only passively defend during the day, it was completely different at night. Given Wang Chong's personality, he would never resign himself to death. This was the only opportunity for the Tang people to strike, as well as the best. As long as Uzan and Mengxizhao were still allies, Wang Chong could constantly pretend to be Uzan soldiers to attack Mengxizhao, and then pretend to be Mengxizhao soldiers to attack Uzan. "Call General Chun and the others back," Wang Chong said as he gazed at the fiery light at the base of the mountain. "In addition, tell them to circle around Uzan's camp on their way back, and raid the Uzan camp before coming back. Tell them not to linger in battle, and not to linger in one place." "Yes, young master." Raiding a camp had to be done when the enemy was unprepared. There was only a split second, so the opportunity had to be seized. In addition, they had to constantly charge forward and not linger in one place. By raiding a camp, they had to leave with a single stomp and not linger in one place for too long. Otherwise, it would become a proper battle. Ha ha ha. Luoji, Chun Guanshuan, and all the other generals of the Annam Protectorate had returned with their armies. Even from a distance, one could hear their hearty laughter. Pretending to be Mengxizhao soldiers to attack Uzan soldiers. Pretending to be Uzan soldiers to attack Mengxizhao soldiers. Only Wang Chong could think of such a thing. "My lord, this plan is too ingenious. The Uzan and Mengxizhao soldiers are probably going to explode with anger. Dalu and Ruozan has been completely suppressed by young master this time. With young master here, what does our Annam Protectorate have to fear? That's right. What Jelifeng, what Duan Gichuan, what Huishu Wazong, what Dalu and Ruozan are worth in front of young master." Torches flickered, and under the illumination of the flames, everyone's faces were fiery red, and they looked incomparably excited. The War of the Southwest was like a mountain weighing down on everyone's heart. Every day was heavy, the atmosphere so heavy that it was hard to breathe. But it was different with Wang Chong. Not only could he keep out legendary figures of the southwest like Huashu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen, leaving them helpless, he could even launch an attack and toy with them in the middle of the night. It's good that generals are confident. Wang Chong also chuckled. It could be seen that this victory had greatly boosted everyone's confidence. This had imperceptibly raised the morale of the army and boosted everyone's morale. This was one of the reasons Wang Chong had sent them out to raid the camp. But although he was happy at the start, Wang Chong couldn't help but frown at the end. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated in 100 battles. Huashu Wuzong didn't understand me, and simply didn't expect me to raid the camp at a time like this. So he fell for the trick. But this sort of thing can only happen once. Generals, you absolutely must not be careless. Neither Huashu Wuzong nor Daluan Ruozhen are easy targets. Although he was very happy to hear the praises of the crowd, if he were to underestimate Huashu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen because of this, he would be in deep trouble. Huashu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen's reputation had been forged, not built from flattery. Even the ferocious tiger of the southwest, Zhangqiu Jinqiong, couldn't do anything to them. So how could people like them be easy to deal with? Even though they had won consecutive victories, Wang Chong didn't dare to underestimate them. It wasn't because he was afraid of them, but because Wang Chong knew that it wasn't that Huashu Wuzong, Daluan Ruozhen, Duan Gichuan, and Jelifeng didn't want to make a move, but that they didn't think that it was the right time for them to do so. When that time came, it would be the true decisive battle. Whether it was the Tang dynasty, Mengshi Zhao, or Uzhen, none of them would have any path of retreat. The casualties at that time would definitely not be as high as they were now. Yes, young master. Hearing Wang Chong's words, the crowd roared in agreement, their expressions filled with deep respect. There shouldn't be any trouble tonight. Everyone go back and rest. Stay alert. Yes. Chapter 597. Prime Minister, when are we going to launch the general offensive? In the Uzhen commander's tent, Jelifeng, Duan Gichuan, Finjie, Duan Yongyan, and all the other Uzhen generals were gathered together. Wait a little longer. Now is not the time. Daluan Ruozhen's voice was firm and unquestionable. A hint of anger appeared in the eyes of all the Mengshi Zhao generals, but none of them dared to say anything. Although the two sides of the Uzhen, Yusang army were equal, everyone knew that the true commander of this battle was not one of Mengshi Zhao's men, but the prime minister of Uzhen, Daluan Ruozhen. All the offensive plans had been formulated by Daluan Ruozhen. Has prime minister still not gotten a good grasp of that brat's background? Jelifeng said with a frown. That brat from the Wang clan had displayed a military strategy that was completely different from any of the generals they knew of. Daluan Ruozhen wanted to probe him, and Jelifeng had no objections. He was not a daring and ambitious person. Once he agreed, he would be handing over the decision of the entire battle to Daluan Ruozhen, as well as the timing of the general offensive. Since he had made this promise, Jelifeng would definitely keep it, and would not randomly interfere. But in this probing operation from day to night, Mengshi Zhao had already lost far too many men, and the night raid had especially enraged them. This was also the reason they had appeared here. No one had expected that the Tang people would still dare to attack them in this sort of situation. This was a naked humiliation, but if after paying such a high price, Daluan Ruozhen still said that he had not obtained any information, that he had not gotten a good grasp of that brat's background, then Jelifeng would find it rather difficult to accept. More or less, but I'm still lacking something. Daluan Ruozhen said faintly. He glanced at Jelifeng and smiled. Your Majesty, I know it's hard for you to accept, but think about it carefully. At the banks of the higher river, your Whitestone Legion easily defeated the Annam Protectorate. If this is still the same Annam Protectorate, with the lineup that the king sent out yesterday, your Mengshi Zhao's people would be able to defeat it without our Uzhen's intervention. But is that really the case? Jelifeng, Mengshi Zhao and the other generals fell silent. Although it was just a test, Mengshi Zhao also launched a powerful attack. Whether it was the Whitestone Legion or the White Elephant Legion, neither held back. Compared to the Battle of Arai, Mengshi Zhao was fighting on the same level of power. But the result of the battle was the opposite of everyone's expectations. At least, one thing Daluan Ruozen said was correct. Even Jelifeng had to admit that the Annam Protectorate with Wang Chong was indeed different from before. But Prime Minister, when will we attack? The Tang dynasty can't spare any manpower right now. But if we delay any longer, the advantage will no longer be on our side. Jelifeng said patiently. Meng Shizhao's greatest advantage in defeating the Tang people at the banks of Arai was numbers. More than 300,000 Meng Shizhao elites had been dispatched to deal with the 180,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers who had left the cities and entered the wilderness. And they had won in one battle. And now, in the alliance between Meng Shizhao and Uzun, in Jelifeng's view, their greatest advantage was also numbers. It was precisely because the two armies occupied an absolute advantage that they had the confidence to win against the less than 100,000 Annam Protectorate with 400,000 to 500,000 soldiers. Giving up the advantage in military strength and testing the waters time and time again, they would only lose their advantage. As for the Annam Protectorate, they should swarm in together and use their advantage in numbers to completely annihilate them. This was the best strategy, no matter what methods the opponents used. In the face of absolute numbers, they were all insignificant tricks. Your Majesty, I know that you lost a lot of troops last night and are very angry. But now is not the time to be angry. The opponents we are facing are much more powerful than we imagined. Daluan Ruozen didn't hide anything in front of Jelifeng. Although Zhangqiu Jinxiong is known as the ferocious tiger of the Tang dynasty, even he wouldn't be able to force us to this extent. Zhangqiu Jinxiong is a crafty old fox. If it were him, he wouldn't have left the city. If he had left the city, with our current military strength, we would have long since unified the southwest. Jelifeng said straightforwardly. Someone like Zhangqiu Jinxiong would never allow himself to fall into such a disadvantageous position. Given his personality, he wouldn't give anyone the slightest opportunity to exploit. If Zhangqiu Jinxiong was still in charge of the southwest, Jelifeng wouldn't have a chance at all. Even the ferocious tiger of the southwest couldn't do anything to them. So how could someone like him be dealt with so easily? It wasn't because he was content, but because Zhangqiu Jinxiong wouldn't give him the chance. This was completely different from Wang Chang's style. No crafty old fox like Zhangqiu Jinxiong would be able to force him into this state. Not even Zhangqiu Jinxiong would be able to reverse the situation. But that boy on the mountain had done it. Haha, although that boy is very formidable, don't praise him too highly. Daluan Ruo grinned and stretched out 2 fingers to pinch a corner of the cloth. With a tug, he revealed a sand table that had been made at some point in the tent. The mountain range on the sand table was particularly large and detailed. Even the steel walls on the mountain range, the steel walls that had been uprooted at the base of the mountain, and the disposition of the soldiers could be seen on the sand table. Prime Minister, seeing this detailed sand table, everyone in the tent was slightly moved. No one had noticed that Daluan Ruozen had made such a detailed sand table in such a short period of time. This level of observation and efficiency had left a deep impression on all of them. Haha, Daluan Ruozen only chuckled. Only by knowing oneself and knowing one's enemy could one emerge victorious in every battle. It wasn't as if he had done nothing since yesterday. I've basically figured out that boy's strategy. The hills of the southwest are low, and the majority of the land is flat plains that are conducive to cavalry charges. Thus, he intentionally led us to this mountain. First, he could slow down the cavalry's charge, and second, he could minimize our advantage in numbers. No matter how many soldiers we have, this mountain can only hold a limited number of soldiers. In other words, even if we still have more than 400,000 soldiers, the number of soldiers that can participate in the assault at the same time is still limited. Everyone in the tent frowned. They hadn't thought so before, but now that they thought about it, that boy really had chosen this place on purpose. As for that boy's strategy, it's very simple. He's using the terrain and the steel walls to build a fortress. This way, the Tang people are most skilled in positional warfare. As for his strategy, all of you should have already experienced it. Daluan Ruozen looked at the generals of Meng Shizhao. It's to constantly make use of all kinds of formations. This kind of advancing and retreating to destroy your formation. If you chase after them, you'll lose your formation. If you don't chase after them, they just need to repeat what they did before. Then what do we do now? Zhao Yuofeng creased his brow. Meng Shijiao had already lost nearly 100,000 men to Wang Chong using this method. There was no doubt that this method, although simple, was very practical. In particular, that boy had obviously used this set of tactics to the acme of perfection. Haven't you noticed? Until now, Wang Yin and Xinyu Zhongtong haven't made a move. Now, it's not that I don't want to launch an all-out attack, but I need an opportunity, a suitable opportunity to launch an all-out attack. Otherwise, once we forcibly launch an all-out attack, you saw the result yesterday. Do you want to pay a greater price than that? Daluan Ruozhen looked at Jelifeng and said. Inside the tent, all the generals of Meng Shijiao, including Jelifeng, were silent. This war had already exhausted all of Meng Shijiao's national strength. What looked like 300,000 soldiers was actually all of Meng Shijiao's strength. If all of them died here, how could they deal with the possible attacks of the Tang dynasty in the future? Moreover, if they suffered too many losses and did not have enough troops, Meng Shijiao would become Uzun's servant. How could they be allies? What does Prime Minister think? A voice suddenly asked. It wasn't Jelifeng, but Duan Gichuan, who had been silent all this time. Duan Gichuan hadn't said anything since he entered the tent. In fact, in the process of forming an alliance between Meng Shijiao and Uzun, Duan Gichuan had tried his best to hide himself. Many times, people had overlooked his existence. But when Duan Gichuan opened his mouth, whether it was Jelifeng, Fengjie, or the other Meng Shijiao generals, all of them naturally accepted that he was overstepping his bounds. Even Jelifeng had no objections. Give me 3 days. After 3 days, I will give you an answer. Daluan Ruozhen said. Okay. Duan Gichuan's words set the tone for the entire meeting. A faint white light rose from the east. In the southwest, where the clouds of war were thick, this was the only way to know that the sun had risen. In the wilderness there was silence. Wang Chong sat cross-legged on the summit of a mountain, motionless. Spiritual energy gathered from all around him and sank into Wang Chong's body. The spiritual energy flowed into Wang Chong's meridians and circulated through his body. Eventually, it met with an invisible barrier and came to a halt. It's still a little lacking. Wang Chong gave a long sigh and opened his eyes. The war in the southwest had already reached an extremely intense level. Wang Chong could sense that the Mengshi army was impulsive to launch an all-out attack at any time. After continuous probing and launching small-scale battles, this was also the natural and inevitable method they would adopt at the same time, because numbers were their greatest advantage. Chapter 598. The killings these days, especially the last strike that killed Jiao Sero, had accumulated a large amount of blood qi in Wang Chong's body. But this blood qi was surging like waves, and he had been unable to convert it into the power of the profound martial arts realm. Why can't I break through? Based on my previous life's holy martial arts realm cultivation, the profound martial arts realm is no problem for me at all. But why is it that I'm stuck in the true martial arts realm? Is it because I've cultivated the little yin-yang art and absorbed the blood qi? Wang Chong thought to himself. The great yin-yang heaven creation art was known as the greatest evil art in the world in his previous life. It was also one of the top 10 divine arts, and its speed of advancement was unimaginable. But even so, to tell the truth, Wang Chong didn't know much about this secret art, especially when it came to breaking through to the next realm. Wang Chong had never asked his master, the evil emperor, how to break through to the profound martial arts realm. Now that he thought about it, this was a huge miscalculation. And if he thought about it carefully, perhaps his master, the evil emperor, wouldn't have expected that he would reach the peak of the true martial arts realm so quickly and be on the verge of breaking through to the profound martial arts realm. After all, it required killing a large number of warriors and absorbing their power, and Wang Chong was only a teenager. But on second thought, Wang Chong felt that something was wrong. Somehow, Wang Chong remembered the art of life slayer that So Yung-sun had taught him. The art of life massacre was born out of Senior Su's art of god and demon obliteration, And the art of god and demon obliteration is one of the mystical arts of the righteous path. Compared to the great yin-yang heaven creation art, yin and yang go against each other. Could it be that this problem arose because I cultivate in both evil and righteous arts? Whether it was the art of god and demon obliteration, or the great yin-yang heaven creation art, they were both unparalleled mystical arts that Wang Chong had never come into contact with in his previous life. Many peerless experts have not even had the chance to come into contact with one of these two mystical techniques, let alone cultivate both at the same time. Now Wang Chong felt that he was walking on a path that he had never thought of, an unfathomable path. Wang Chong thought for a long time, but couldn't figure it out. So he simply stood up. "The eagle, how is my big brother? Eldest young master has taken young master's medicine, and is much better now." The eagle said sincerely. "Yes." Wang Chong nodded and quickly walked in. "Did you observe it?" In a place that Wang Chong couldn't see, a voice came, carrying a special meaning. "My lord, they've already started cooking," a Mengshi Zhao man respectfully said to the people behind him. Behind him, there were a few other people, all of whom were sent by Jelifeng to assist Daluan Ruozhen. "Carefully observe the number of cooking fires they have," Daluan Ruozhen said. The few people responded, and quickly disappeared into the distance. No one knew what Daluan Ruozhen was doing, but neither Jelifeng nor Duan Gichuan said anything. For 3 days in a row, Daluan Ruozhen had been sending people to observe the Annam Protectorate's daily cooking from all directions of the mountain range. After 3 days, Daluan Ruozhen's brows slowly furrowed. "How is it, Prime Minister? What happened?" Jelifeng said. Although he didn't do anything in the past few days, everything Daluan Ruozhen did couldn't escape his eyes. However, Daluan Ruozhen didn't say anything, and even Jelifeng didn't know what he was doing. "The situation is not good." Daluan Ruozhen's brows furrowed so tightly that Jelifeng's heart skipped a beat. "Do you remember what I said to you before? It seems that child has not only brought a large number of steel walls, but also a large number of rations. How is that possible?" Jelifeng and the generals behind her all paled. The Annam Protectorate had already found it difficult to deal with the steel walls they had built. If they also had a large number of rations, then they would be helpless. "Why is Prime Minister so certain?" Crown Prince Finjie couldn't help but ask. "Your Highness, do you still remember why the Annam Protectorate abandoned the city to break out?" Daluan Ruozhen said. "Of course it was because they didn't have enough rations, and had no choice but to do so." "That's right. Based on my estimation, their rations wouldn't last a day. But that's not the case at all. You must have noticed that I've asked people to observe the number of stoves they have for the past 3 days. But the number of stoves the Tang people have not decreased at all." Daluan Ruozhen's expression was solemn. "This means that the Tang people definitely have more rations than we know. They must have enough rations in reserve to dare to do this." As soon as Daluan Ruozhen finished speaking, even Duan Gichuan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. He didn't have much contact with Daluan Ruozhen, and didn't know much about General Uzhen's style of doing things. However, even Duan Gichuan didn't expect that Daluan Ruozhen could see so many things from the number of stoves the Tang people had. "The reason why I stopped His Majesty, and didn't want to launch an all-out attack, was because I wanted to find out the number of rations the Tang people had, and then make a decision. But now everything is developing in the direction we don't want to see the most." Daluan Ruozhen said. It was rare for anyone to see Daluan Ruozhen so solemn and panicked, but there was no doubt that the rations Wang Chong had prepared had completely disrupted his plans. The Tang dynasty has always taken a lot of time and effort to prepare rations. Just how did he do it? "Prime Minister, I still find it hard to believe," Crown Prince Finjie muttered to himself. If what Daluan Ruozhen said was true, then Wang Chong's abilities were unimaginable. "There's no meaning in discussing this. That brat has already done it. There's no doubt about it." Daluan Ruozhen's expression was incomparably ugly. Daluan Ruozhen hadn't cared that the Annam Protectorate led by Wang Chong had defeated Mengshi Zhao and Uzhen in succession. But when he determined that the Tang people had enough rations, Daluan Ruozhen instantly found it hard to remain calm. Because this meant that Wang Chong and the Annam Protectorate had the ability to contend against them for a long time. Is there really no other way? Huashu Wuzong normally didn't interrupt, but at this time, he couldn't help but show his concern. Let me think. There has to be another way. Daluan Ruozan waved his hand, clearly somewhat distraught. All of you go out first. Let me have some peace. An imperceptible trace of worry flitted through Huashu Wuzong's eyes. He had worked with Daluan Ruozan for so many years, but he had rarely seen him pushed to this point. Everyone go out first. Huashu Wuzong quickly let everyone out of the tent. From dawn to dusk, Daluan Ruozan sat alone in the tent. No one dared to disturb him. However, they didn't have to wait for too long. Around dawn the next day, Daluan Ruozan finally walked out of the tent. Ha ha ha. You think you're so smart. You think you're so smart. Before Daluan Ruozan appeared, a hearty laughter came from the tent. The tent door opened, and the haze that had been hanging over Daluan Ruozan for the past few days was swept away. Prime Minister, how is it? Everyone went up to greet him. To be honest, Daluan Ruozan's reaction yesterday really shocked everyone. Ha 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 ha, Prime Minister. Did you find a solution? Jelifeng walked over with his head held high. He had sent people to keep an eye on Daluan Ruozan this entire time. If there was even the slightest sign of trouble, he would be notified. Not bad. I've already found their flaw. No matter how much he calculated, that brat still missed something in the end. Your Majesty, give me 10 days, and I will definitely let you have a taste of what you want. Daluan Ruozan heartily laughed, his expression glowing. Haha, this is the wise minister I know. Jelifeng had a gratified expression on her face. Seeing the expressions on the faces of the two commanders, Uzan, Mengshi Zhao, and all the other generals immediately relaxed. Prime Minister, did you really find the flaw in the Tang people? Fenjie's eyes glowed as he excitedly asked. That's right. Although that brat from the Wang clan is formidable, he hasn't reached the point where his plans are flawless. Do you see this mountain? This is where he was the smartest, but it is also where he blundered the most. Fenjie, Duan Yongyan, Siren Xiangxiong, all of them looked at Daluan Ruozan as he walked out of the tent, exchanging glances. Prime Minister, please instruct me. Fenjie humbly said. Don't you see this place? Water can be dug out of the plains. But Your Highness the Crown Prince, let me ask you, can water also be dug out of a mountain? Daluan Ruozan's words left all the generals of Mengshi Zhao and Fenjie dumbfounded. Even Long Kimba was confused, not understanding what his commander meant. Only Huashu Wuzong had a pensive look on his face, as if he understood something. Does Prime Minister mean to say that they lack water? A voice rang out. Duan Gichuan suddenly interrupted. Correct. Daluan Ruozan had a solemn expression. It's easy to get rations, but where do we get our daily drinking water from? Don't we need water to light a fire and cook? If my guess is correct, that son of the Wang clan's only source of water was that torrential downpour several days ago. But no matter how prepared he was, he definitely didn't store much water, and it definitely wasn't enough for 80 to 90,000 horses. Even if he came prepared and prepared a large number of bags of water, it definitely wouldn't be too much. In 10 days, at most 10 days, I'm confident that they'll have used up most of their water supply. That will be the best time for us to attack. The more Daluan Ruozan spoke, the brighter the eyes of the generals became. Towards the end, even Jelifeng couldn't help but have a strange look in her eyes. Ha 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 ha, Daluan Ruozan, I truly didn't make a mistake. You truly do have a good plan to defeat the enemy. Jelifeng heartily laughed. Her anxiety of the last few days swept away. That's right, Your Majesty. This general suddenly remembered something. During the night raid a few days ago, we found that quite a few bags of water were missing. A Mengshi Zhao general suddenly remembered something and spoke. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere immediately became completely different. Everyone was certain, and there were no longer any doubts. Young Master, the Mengshi Yusang army at the base of the mountain has begun to move. A guard on the summit suddenly reported. Wang Chong immediately stood up and began to walk forward. As expected from the summit, he could see that the Mengshi Yusang army that had been silent for the last few days had suddenly begun to move. A hint of confusion flitted through Wang Chong's eyes. Chapter 599. Daluan Ruozen? Wang Chong was inwardly surprised. It had been several days since he had seen this Uzum prime minister. As the saying went, those who came did not come with good intentions. For Daluan Ruozen to come out at this time could not have been anything good. Prime Minister, I trust you have been well since we last met. Wang Chong spoke first, his voice rumbling in all directions. Young master, it's been a long time. Daluan Ruozen leisurely waved the feather fan in his hand, a smile on his face. Seeing Daluan Ruozen's expression, Wang Chong's heart thumped. There was definitely something strange about this man who could still smile and look so calm after suffering so many casualties. Prime Minister seems to be in a good mood, Wang Chong said calmly. Haha, young master has been very comfortable these last few days. Daluan Ruozen said with a smile, his expression even more relaxed. To tell you the truth, this minister has come today to tell young master something. Oh, Wang Chong had a pensive look on his face. Prime Minister is truly in a leisurely mood. Haha, young master, don't misunderstand. This minister actually admires young master. The smile on Daluan Ruozen's face grew wider and wider, the fan in his hand growing slower and slower. Whether it's Lion City or this city of steel, young master's vision and talent have left a deep impression. I can see that young master has come prepared. But this minister would like to ask, has young master prepared enough water? With these last words, Daluan Ruozen put away his feather fan and began to laugh heartily. Buzz! Wang Chong's pupils constricted, his expression suddenly changing. In the distance, Daluan Ruozen withdrew his troops and vanished once more, leaving only his laughter echoing throughout the battlefield. At the summit of the mountain, Wang Chong was motionless, his expression extremely grave. A gentle breeze blew past, but his body felt incredibly cold. What's wrong, young master? The eagle walked over from behind and asked with concern. He found out. This was the only thought left in Wang Chong's mind. There was a huge flaw in all of Wang Chong's plans, and it couldn't be fixed no matter what, and that was the water source. There was very little precipitation in the southwest, and a torrential downpour like the one before was already extremely rare. However, the daily necessities of nearly 100,000 men and horses had to be solved. However, water was different from steel. Wang Chong could not transport water like steel. Moreover, in order to deal with Uzun and Mengshi Zhao, Wang Chong had chosen to fight in the mountains, which made it even more difficult for Wang Chong to obtain water. This was something that could never be remedied. Wang Chong had been trying his best to hide this, but in the end, Daluan Ruozen still found out. Call Mr. Zhang Shouji over. Under the flagpole, Wang Chong suddenly spoke. Young master. Zhang Shouji had arrived much faster than expected. Behind Wang Chong, Zhang Shouji respectfully bowed. Zhang Shouji's face was still pale, but after the eagle had struck his sleeping acupoint, his complexion was much better. In addition, Wang Chong had given him some pills that could strengthen his body and revitalize his blood. In the end, they had still had some effect. Senior Zhang, how much water do we have left? How much has Su Yiqin prepared for us? And how much longer can the army last? Wang Chong said after a long silence. Lady Su has already been very attentive and prepared a large number of water bags for us. However, water is a very special thing and cannot be transported like ordnance. In addition, when we arrived here early, according to young master's orders, we dug many reservoirs on the summit. We also received quite a bit of the torrential rain. In addition, young master had us arrive early and dig a water source nearby so that we could prepare for the battle. So our water supply is actually quite good. In addition, in the previous night attack, we also looted many water bags from Mengshi Zhao's people. However, the daily water consumption of 80,000 to 90,000 soldiers is not a small number. No matter how much water we have stored, it is ultimately not enough. Zhang Shouji said. Only he and Wang Chong knew about the water supply of 80,000 to 90,000 soldiers. No one else knew at all. It was to avoid the possible panic that might be caused. Water was different from food. It seemed inconspicuous, but it had to be used every day. cooking, daily drinking, and war horses were all indispensable. Without sufficient water, the army would have problems, and it was even more fatal than food. The key was that Wang Chong had chosen to fight on the mountain, which meant that the problem of water supply was destined to be a natural defect that could not be remedied. This was fish and bear's paw. They could not have their cake and eat it too. Dalawan Ruozhen had hit his Achilles heel. "Tell me, how many days can we last?" Wang Chong said calmly. 10, 12 days. Zhang Shouji said. "Just how long?" Wang Chong frowned as he spoke once more. 10 days, no, 9 days at most. Zhang Shouji hesitated, clenched his teeth, and finally told the truth. Whoosh! The expressions of the eagle, Chen Shu Sun, the guards on the mountain peak, and the messengers all changed. Earlier, when Dalawan Ruozhen had come out to talk to Wang Chong, they had already sensed that something was wrong. But now that they only had 9 days' worth of drinking water, they realized that the situation was far more serious than they had imagined. In an instant, the atmosphere on the mountain peak became incredibly heavy, but the entire mountain peak was silent. Everyone kept their mouths shut, not daring to utter a single word. "So after 9 days they will launch a large-scale attack," the eagle said worriedly. "There's no need for 9 days. 5 days, 6 days at most, and they will launch their attack. Dalawan Ruozhen will not wait until we run out of water to attack." Wang Chong said gravely. Dalawan Ruozhen would not wait that long, and neither would Jelifeng. In 5 days, the army would immediately experience an obvious water shortage. The war horses and their daily drinking water supply would all experience an obvious change. If they had not known beforehand, the army would not have had any problems. But Dalawan Ruozhen clearly knew this, which was why he had specially met with him. And on the 6th day, the situation would worsen, and morale would be shaken. The war horses drinking water, the soldiers drinking water, would rapidly decrease. Everyone could sense this change. But Wang Chong had no choice but to do so, because once they changed their strategy, they would consume a large amount of water. Given Dalawan Ruozhen's style, he would definitely change his strategy and delay it until the 7th day. Or if he discovered that Wang Chong had continued to do so, the Annam Protectorate's water supply would be depleted much faster, and they would not be able to last until the 9th day. Once the army ran out of water, only death awaited them. "Young master, why don't we start a water restriction now? Perhaps we can still last until the 12th day," Zhang Shouji probed. "No need," Wang Chong said without hesitation. "If we change our strategy now, morale will drop. Dalawan Ruozhen will immediately launch his attack in less than 5 days. Also, don't forget why we're here." Old Eagle and even Chen Shusun trembled in shock as they reacted. Wang Chong had told them before that a war had 2 aspects, tactics and strategy. In terms of tactics, their goal was to hold back the Mengshi, Yusang army and hold them down. As for strategy, the outcome of a war would not be decided by just 1 or 2 battles. For Wang Chong, there was another factor that would decide the outcome of this war of the Southwest. The imperial court. "I wonder if Big Uncle and the King of Song have made any moves?" Wang Chong quietly said to himself. The Tang dynasty truly had declined. The people longed for peace, and the long years of peace had caused the Tang dynasty to gradually lose its initial drive. Wang Chong was sure that the Tang dynasty was currently surrounded by other powers that were restless and full of hidden dangers. The Turks, Goguryeo, Arabia, Karaxpazinu, and the kingdoms of the western regions, past and potential enemies of the Tang dynasty, were working with the Mengshi, Yusang armies to restrain the Tang dynasty's forces. But the Tang dynasty was still the Tang dynasty. It had accumulated over 100 years. Wang Chong was confident that as long as he could delay the Mengshi, Yusang army for a while, the imperial court would eventually send reinforcements. "How is it?" Outside Uzun's tent, everyone was gathered. Dalawan Ruozhen and Jelifeng were at the front, Huashu Wuzong and Duan Gichuan at the back, and then the other generals. Nearby, the mountain where the Tang dynasty had set up camp looked like a massive beast from prehistoric times. But everyone's gazes followed Dalawan Ruozhen to the smoke curling up from the summit. Every day, the commanders of both sides would punctually appear at the 3 meals of the Tang army to observe. This had already become a marvel for the Mengshi, Yusang army. The amount of smoke hasn't decreased in the slightest compared to yesterday. The Tang people still haven't controlled their water usage. Fenjie added. He had been a hostage in the capital of the Tang dynasty, and had lived there for some time. He had dabbled in the art of war, Confucianism, and many other things. Thus, he had a little understanding of how to judge the temperature of a stove. This is the brilliance of that son of the Wang clan. Daluan Ruozhen sighed. Putting aside their respective standpoints, Daluan Ruozhen actually felt a great deal of admiration and praise for Wang Chong. This was definitely a formidable foe. If he was allowed to fully mature, not even Daluan Ruozhen knew how much he would grow. But it was precisely for this reason that Daluan Ruozhen could not allow him to leave alive. The great Tang army is already beginning to doubt my words. If he starts to control the water usage right now, the water will last a little longer. But the army will probably begin to panic. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will get. This will be much worse than not controlling the water usage. But will this be of any use? Crown Prince Fenjie asked. Of course not. Daluan Ruozhen roared with laughter. No matter what he does, it's useless. This is his Achilles heel. No matter how smart he is, he can't do anything about it. Your Majesty, the moment you've been waiting for has come. In 7 days at most, we will launch our all-out attack. Chapter 600. On the second and third days, Daluan Ruozhen and Jelifeng continued to observe, but the number of Annam Protectorate posts never decreased. But the mood had subtly changed. Just when Jeluofeng and Daluan Ruozhen believed that this would always be the case, on the fourth day, something completely unexpected occurred. Flap flap. A massive pigeon, pitch black in color, flapped its wings and landed in the Uzun army tent. It's news from the northeast. Daluan Ruozhen glanced at the symbol on the pigeon's leg, and took off the leggings, a hint of confusion in his eyes. The northeast of the Uzun Empire was naturally the Tang dynasty's Longxi. That was where Witadra Konglo and Dusong Mangpoch were currently engaged in a fierce battle with the Big Dipper army commanded by Geshu Han. Witadra Konglo had no problem suppressing Geshu Han, and the Big Dipper army could only defend, not fight back. Daluan Ruozhen did not understand why Witadra Konglo had sent a message at a time like this. With a hint of confusion, Daluan Ruozhen tore open the message in the leggings. Bzzz. Daluan Ruozhen suddenly paled. What's happened? Huashu Wuzong walked out from behind him. Take a look for yourself. Daluan Ruozhen handed over the letter. There was only a very short paragraph on the paper. The Tang dynasty's war god, Wang Zhongxi, had left the capital and was heading for Longxi. Huashu Wuzong paled. This is troublesome. Huashu Wuzong muttered to himself, his expression grave. From the top to the bottom of the Uzun Empire, including the Tsempo, if there was one person that everyone feared, then that person would be the war god of the Tang dynasty, Wang Zhongxi. Between the Uzun and the Tang dynasty, in the several wars led by Wang Zhongxi, the Uzun had almost always suffered a crushing defeat. Even the great general Lord Witadra Konglo had suffered a crushing defeat at Wang Zhongxi's hands. The Tang army led by Wang Zhongxi had even almost attacked the plateau and occupied the capital of the Uzun Empire. Later on, when they heard that Wang Zhongxi had entered the palace to become the crown prince's junior guardian, the entire Uzun Empire almost celebrated. Everyone heaved a deep sigh of relief. To the entire Uzun Empire, Wang Zhongxi's action was absolutely earth-shattering news. We don't have much time left. The great General King won't be able to hold on for much longer. Daluan Ruozhen said with an ugly expression. In the entire Tang dynasty, there was one person that Daluan Ruozhen could not control, Wang Zhongxi. This person's level had completely surpassed Daluan Ruozhen's. Although Daluan Ruozhen was not willing to boost the morale of others and diminish his own, in all fairness, Witadra Konglo was no match for Wang Zhongxi. He had heard that Wang Zhongxi's body was riddled with hidden injuries, and that in order to recover, he had been forced to enter the palace to take up the post of Crown Prince's junior guardian. But now, it appeared that these rumors had all been baseless. To the Uzun Empire, this was an extremely bad sign. Wang Zhongxi will need at most 10 days to get from the capital to Longxi. In other words, we only have 10 days at most to completely destroy the Annam Protectorate and pacify the southwest. It seems like we have to move faster, Huashu Wuzong solemnly said. Old Sher, do you still have water? Let me use your water skin. Behind the high steel walls, an Annam Protectorate veteran licked his slightly dry lips and extended a hand to another veteran next to him. No more, no more. The veteran turned the water skin upside down. The last drop of water flowed out and was caught by the veteran. Don't you see? I don't have enough for myself. If I want to drink water, I'll have to wait a few hours for the higher-ups to distribute it. I don't remember having this sort of water restriction before. Do you think they're telling the truth? There really isn't much water left in the army. A voice came from the side. For a moment, the surroundings were deathly still as everyone stared at the soldier who had spoken. You're seeking death. What nonsense are you spouting? A veteran kicked him to the ground, his eyes constantly drifting to the summit. Although he was doing his utmost to maintain his composure, even he himself was feeling intensely uneasy. The atmosphere was silent, and no one noticed that an uneasy atmosphere was spreading through the army. Young master, the situation isn't good. The eagle worriedly looked down the mountain. The thing that everyone had been most worried about had occurred. The lack of water had forced the army to impose water restrictions. This would have been fine in the past, but with Dalawan Ruozen's words, everything had changed. Even someone like the eagle, who did not understand the art of war, could sense that the morale of the army was completely different from a few days ago. This was a very unsettling sign. I understand, Wang Chong indifferently said, his face showing no emotion. What had already happened. What he should be thinking about now was how to resolve the problem. Reporting. The enemy troops at the base of the mountain are on the move. A messenger suddenly rushed to the summit and kneeled down. Buzz. Everyone turned to look down the mountain. The Mengshi, Yusang army, which they had not seen for many days, was suddenly restless. Tens of thousands of soldiers were surging in from all directions, a cloud of dust and banners flying everywhere. Their imposing aura seemed to blot out the sun. And in this army, those mountainous elephants were the most frightening. Not good. The eagle grimaced. The Uzan are about to attack. Pass on my order. All soldiers get ready. In the midst of the chaos, Wang Chong's calm voice was exceptionally clear, spreading through the entire army. Bong! The drums thundered, and from the summit to the base of the mountain, the entire army became somber. Clang clang clang. The clattering of metal came from the base of the mountain. With the Mengshi, Yusang commanders at the center, dazzling rings of light rippled through the entire army. Tens of thousands of war halos of all kinds filled the field of vision. This was the first time in history that the Mengshi, Yusang armies had joined forces. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were attacking at the same time, their momentum like a massive wave. This was a stark contrast to the deathly stillness of the Tang army. But even though the mountain was silent, the mood only grew more and more tense. Every soldier of the Annam Protectorate army tightly gripped their weapons, their expressions grim. Chonger, on the summit, just as Wang Chong was solemnly looking down the mountain, a voice rang out at his ear. Father! Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately reacted. He subconsciously looked down the mountain, at the tall, burly and imposing figure. This was the ability to transmit sound. Although his back was facing him, with his father's ability, it was not a problem at all. In a little while, when the battle begins, leave Huashu Wuzong and Duan Gechuan to me and Protector General Xinyu. Don't move and don't approach. An opponent of this level isn't someone you can handle. Wang Yin opened his mouth and said with a different meaning in his voice. Ever since they arrived at this mountain range, Wang Yin and Xinyu Zhongtong had been sitting on the sidelines, giving almost all the authority to Wang Chong. But this time, the nature was completely different. I understand. Wang Chong nodded with a heavy heart. Obviously, even his father and Xinyu Zhongtong felt that the situation was not good this time. There was no more probing, no more contempt. Uzan and Mengshi Zhao were prepared to use all their strength to exterminate them. And they had chosen this moment, when the Tang dynasty's army was facing a water crisis, and their morale was at its lowest. Rumble, while the Annam Protectorate's army was on guard, To the southeast, southwest, east, west, north, powerful figures began to appear, all of them exuding a storm of energy. It's Longkimba. The eagle suddenly stepped forward. No, there's also Fenjie, Duan Yongyan, Chen Shusun said. One figure after another appeared at the base of the mountain. Longkimba, Fenjie, Duan Yongyan, Siren Xiangxiong, Tumi Sangza, as well as the generals of Mengshi Zhao and the valiant generals of Uzun. All of them stood proudly in the dust, thousands of soldiers behind them. Chapter 601. Although nothing had happened yet, a huge pressure suddenly came crashing down on him. Ever since the start of the battle, the Mengshi Yusang army had only sent 1 or 2 generals. There had been no large-scale deployment of generals. But now, everything was completely different. Longkimba, Fenjie, Duan Yongyan, Siren Xiangxiong, Tumi Sangza. In the previous battles, any one of these people would have been enough to cause the Tang dynasty a great deal of trouble, let alone all of them. A storm was brewing. At this moment, even the slowest person could tell that they were about to face a fierce battle. Rumble, smoke and dust billowed. From the south of the mountain range, a torrent of steel surged over. At the very front of the group, 2 silhouettes were moving side by side. They were very eye-catching. Young Master Wang, have you resolved the problem of water? Loud laughter came from the base of the mountain. Daluan Ruozan was seated on the back of an Uzun steed. He was the first to look up at the summit, a smile in his eyes. He could sense that the mood of the Tang people was extremely bad. In the past few days, he had been forced to do all sorts of things by Wang Chong, and Daluan Ruozan had rarely been suppressed to this extent. But in the end, Wang Chong had still managed to find his weak point. Young master, don't speak with him. Even the eagle could tell that Daluan Ruozan was up to no good in seeking out Wang Chong to speak with him. It's fine. Wang Chong waved his hand. His expression had been grave, but when he heard Daluan Ruozan's words, he couldn't help but smile. Prime Minister, I know that you're going to launch another attack today. Let's make a bet. Let's bet on how many Uzun and Mengshi Zhao will lose this time? Wang Chong faintly smiled, and as he spoke, he walked up to the banner. On the first day, Uzun and Mengshi Zhao lost nearly 100,000 men. Prime Minister, guess how many of your men will die after this battle ends? I guess half the people here are going to die. What do you think? As Wang Chong spoke, he slowly extended a finger and drew a circle in the direction of the army at the foot of the mountain. Buzz! Hearing these words, Uzun's people didn't have much of a reaction. After all, they didn't understand. However, Mengshi Zhao's people were different. In an instant, the entire army's expressions changed. The atmosphere was completely different from before. Wang Chong's words might just be a threat to others, but to Mengshi Zhao's people, it was a real warning. This was because, among the nearly 100,000 people who died on the first day, more than 80% of them were Mengshi Zhao's men. To these people, Wang Chong's words were definitely not a simple threat. Haha, young master, you have a sharp tongue. Daluan Ruozan waved his feather fan, as an almost imperceptible glint flashed across his eyes. He had to admit that even he didn't expect Wang Chong to use such a move. However, what's the use of having a sharp tongue, young master? Cleverness can be the bane of one's own ingenuity. Young master purposely chose this place to fight us, but in the end, he dug his own grave. Prime Minister, don't you think it's too early to say that? Wang Chong's gaze paused for a moment. Then he sneered and said, let's wait until after the battle to decide who's whose grave. Haha, it's good that young master is so confident. I won't say anything else to you. As Daluan Ruozan spoke, he turned his gaze in another direction. Seeing this, Wang Chong only smiled and said nothing. Wang Yan Xinyu Zhongtong, this is your last chance. Do you want to surrender? Daluan Ruozan's voice echoed throughout the battlefield. Prime Minister, don't waste your energy. Let's fight. The battlefield was silent. After a moment, Wang Yan's voice finally rang out. His words were concise and straightforward, leaving no room for negotiation. As you wish. With a cold grunt, Daluan Ruozan turned his horse around and walked towards the back of the battlefield amidst the billowing dust. Begin. Following the cold voice, Rows of high-pitched and desolate yak horns sounded across the sky. Strong winds howled and thick smoke billowed. In this tense atmosphere, the first wave of attack was not from Uzun and Mengshi Zhao's cavalry, but from giant rocks. Boom! 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 Huge rocks whistled and tumbled as they soared into the sky from afar. They drew huge arcs in the void, and then smashed into the mountain fiercely. Rumble! Dust billowed. Pieces of the steel wall were tilted, and some were even sent flying. Watch out! Screams resounded over the mountain. Under the assault of the giant rocks, the Annam Protectorate soldiers on the mountain began to take cover. Kill! The moment the giant rocks fell, the entire Mengshi, Yusang army also attacked. Rumble! Amidst the billowing smoke and dust, huge metal shields flickered with a cold, dim light. The White Stone Legion, 70% of which had been killed by the Annam Protectorate in the previous battle, attacked once more. This time, everyone was mobilized, even the injured Duan Wuxia. His body was wrapped in bandages, and his aura was flickering between light and dark, strong and weak, but his eyes were bright and spirited. All soldiers advance. Anyone who dares to retreat will be immediately executed. Kill 5 of the Tang people, and you will be rewarded with a centurion. Kill 10 of the Tang people, and you will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of gold. Duan Wuxi's hoarse voice resounded over the battlefield, and the rings of light beneath his feet began to spread to cover the entire army. Bam! To the southeast, the elephants bellowed as they followed closely behind the White Stone Legion. Under the cover of the Mengshi Zhao soldiers, the mountainous Arai elephants began to charge toward the mountain. If one looked carefully, one would discover that the ears of these elephants were glimmering with a white gold light. These were exquisite metal ornaments. In the battle several days ago, Wang Chong had killed more than 200 elephants with just a few roars, and several thousand soldiers had been killed by the rampaging elephants. In order to deal with the Tang people, Mengshi Zhao had designed these exquisite ornaments to help the elephants block the soundwave attacks. All of this had been the handiwork of Daluan Ruozhen. To the southwest, Mengshi Zhao soldiers dressed in gold and white armor swarmed forward. Whether it was in spirit, energy, or strength, these people were far superior to the rest of the army. They weren't the slightest bit inferior to the Annam Protectorate at the summit, and the quality of their armor was even superior. In all of the Mengshi Zhao Empire, only Crown Prince Fenjie's Dragon Sun Legion could be equipped with such fine armor. This legion was composed entirely of elites, and a significant portion of them were even part of Mengshi Zhao's Imperial Guard. This legion was under the direct command of Jelifeng, and even Fenjie had to obtain Jelifeng's approval before he could mobilize them. As the two armies began to fight, Jelifeng finally handed over Mengshi Zhao's most elite legion to Fenjie. All soldiers hear my order. Without my order, no one is allowed to move. Fully armored, Fenjie stared at the summit, his eyes blazing with the desire to fight. Come Wang Chong. Today, this place will be your burial ground. Fenjie's heart blazed with the flames of war. Never before had Fenjie wanted to destroy an opponent as much as he did now. This was not just for the fallen Jiao Sero, but for himself. In this battle, Wang Chong had overshadowed far too much of his brilliance. If he couldn't surpass his opponent, then the best method was to completely destroy him. Northeast, northwest, south, north. Siren Xiangxiong Long Kimba, Duan Hengdao, all the Mengshi, Yusang commanders launched their attacks. Behind them were tens of thousands of soldiers, boundless like a sea, endless, surrounding the entire mountain range. Clang, clang, clang. Countless war halos erupted from their feet and spread throughout the army. All commanders, take up your positions and prepare to attack. On the summit, Wang Chong's voice was calm and composed, spreading through the army. Following Wang Chong's order, the hundreds of Annam Protectorate commanders were like chess pieces, scattered all over the mountain. If one looked down from the sky, they would discover that the distribution of these Tang Dynasty commanders was like the stars in the sky. The Myriad Stars formation. This was an extremely powerful formation in his previous life. It could link the generals who played a key role in the army into a sturdy fortress. This formation could maximize the strength of these generals and radiate their strength to the rest of the army. This formation had not yet appeared in this era, and Wang Chong did not have enough time to train these commanders. However, a rough demonstration of the myriad stars formation was more than enough to raise the fighting power of the army. Boom! 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 Dazzling halos blazed like flames, the halos of thorns connecting with each other to cover the entire mountain. In just a moment, the two armies crashed into each other like a tidal wave. Rumble! No one could describe the impact at that moment. The earth quaked and the mountain swayed. The entire mountain range trembled violently from the impact. Many broken rocks rolled down from the mountain range. Kill! Kill! The first to attack was not the White Stone Legion, but the even more powerful Giant Elephant Legion. The army parted, and an Arai elephant, 8 to 9 meters tall, flapped its huge ears, and rushed up the slope with heavy steps like a gust of wind. Bang! A steel wall weighing 6 to 7,000 jin was swept up by the elephant's trunk, and was immediately flung into the sky as if it was weightless. Then it was flung down the slope. Ding ding ding! Hooks flew out, and latched onto the distant steel walls. Some Tibetan cavalry swiftly turned around, and began to madly pull. With a massive boom, the walls collapsed, sending dust into the air. Many of the Mengshi Zhao soldiers who had been waiting for a long time charged forward. And of all the soldiers, the sharpest was Longkimba. Bzz. A sharp saber arc cut through the air. And wherever it passed, screams and severed limbs flew through the air. Even the sturdy steel walls were cut open by this saber arc. Longkimba's strength had reached an inconceivable level. And wherever he went, he would create a battlefield of Azura. Ha ha ha, the so-called Tang dynasty is only SOO. Chapter 602. Bang! A massive halberd smashed against the mountain. This simple movement seemed to carry the weight of 10,000 jun. And even Longkimba couldn't help but raise his brows. Longkimba, we meet again. A low and deep voice rang out from the cliff. In the vast and mighty gale, that person's long hair fluttered in the wind. On that rock-hard face was a pair of eyes that were as deep as the ocean. Sun Luiwei. Longkimba's expression darkened as he stopped. This person's armor was completely different from that of the Annam Protectorate. It was simple and heavy, and there was nothing special about it other than its weight. In truth, this person was not a member of the Annam Protectorate. Wang Yan had several valiant generals under his command. These people were different from ordinary generals. They did not hold any official positions, but their status in the army was so high that not even Chen Shusun could compare. Sun Luiwei was one of them. He was not only Wang Yan's personal guard, but also a retainer of the Wang clan. When Wang Yan had joined the army, Duke Jiu had sent him to stand at Wang Yan's side. These people were all experts that had been carefully selected from the army. Whenever Wang Yan joined the army, these people were almost inseparable. They were like Wang Yan's shadow. And when Wang Yan was not present, they could take Wang Yan's place to oversee the army and respond to any unexpected situations. In the month that Lion City had been besieged, Longkimba had been able to kill gods and Buddhas alike. Only Sun Liuyue's appearance had managed to curb his arrogance. Annoying fellow. Longkimba's pupils constricted as he gripped his scimitar and charged forward. Rumble. The moment he charged forward, there was a flash of light as a massive shadow appeared behind him like a demon god. It's finally my turn. As the two armies fiercely clashed, no one noticed a short, but capable figure appear on the back of the mountain. Tumi Sangza looked up at the Caltrip waterfall, that was several dozen zhang wide, an inexplicable smile on his face. Boom! With this thought, Tumi Sangza stomped his foot down. Boom! An invisible ripple spread out in every direction. In the next moment, the picture on the hillside suddenly changed. Hundreds of iron men, thousands of them, suddenly stood up from the Caltrip waterfall. These iron men glanced around, and quickly cleared the surrounding caltrips. Pung pung pung. These metal men picked up the caltrips on the mountain, and continuously threw them down the mountain. Nearly 100 metal men moved together, and their speed was incredibly fast. Buzz! Tumi Sangza turned his eyes, and quickly aimed at the two massive steel walls. He spread open his fingers and began to summon. Get up! Roar! The two huge steel walls twisted as if they were melting. Amidst the deafening roars, Two prehistoric beast-like steel giants rose from the ground and climbed up the mountain. With the addition of these two steel giants, the speed of clearing immediately sped up. Once this path is cleared, it will be the best path for cavalry to charge. Tumi Sangza gave a sinister laugh as he looked up the mountain. With the two armies engaged in battle, this was the best time to clear away the caltrops. The Prime Minister's plan was not just to defeat them on the battlefield. Leaving the Iron Men behind, Tumi Sangza quickly climbed up the mountain. This was an unprecedented battle, far more intense than any of the previous battles. The dense ranks of the Mengshi, Yusang army surged forward like a massive wave. Although the 100,000 soldiers of the White Stone Legion had attacked in a frenzy before, the numbers this time were far greater. Every soldier of the Annam Protectorate was under an unimaginable pressure. Although the soldiers on the outermost perimeter each had a large shield in their hands, these shields were trembling like raindrops. The frenzied and concentrated attacks were on the verge of shattering all the bones in their bodies. Not only that, the Mengshi, Yusang army was also clearing away the steel walls on the mountain. This further reduced the area in which the soldiers could move, making the Annam Protectorate's situation worse and worse. It's about time. Wang Chong looked down from his vantage point at the entire battlefield. Although the Mengshi, Yusang army was coming with a ferocious momentum, everything was still within his control. Boom! As the Mengshi, Yusang army pressed forward, layer by layer, Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he suddenly stomped down. Boom! This stomp caused the mountain to sway, and an invisible energy began to radiate out along the surface of the mountain, spreading over the entire battlefield. The bane of the battlefield halo, Wang Chong had finally released the strongest halo in his body. Buzz! An invisible ripple spread out, and the halos beneath the feet of the tens of thousands of Mengshi, Yusang soldiers dimmed like candles in the face of a powerful attack. Buzz! In a flash, the auras of the hundreds of thousands of Uzan and Mengshi Zhao soldiers on the mountain dimmed by an entire level. At the same time that Wang Chong unleashed the bane of the battlefield halo, attack! The Annam Protectorate, which had been on the defensive, chose to take the initiative to attack. Twang twang twang. Deafening booms filled the air. But the first to attack were not the infantry at the base of the mountain, but the ballistae of the Tang dynasty. On flat ground, it was almost impossible for ballistae to circle around the soldiers at the front. But on a mountain like this, everything was possible. Boom boom boom. The tens of thousands of soldiers on the battlefield became the best place for the ballistae to harvest. When the thick inscribed crossbow bolts flew out, spears pierced through the gaps between the shields in front of the front line. In the past, the attacks of these spearmen would have been limited, but now all the Mengshi, Yusang soldiers, whether they were Uzan or Mengshi Zhao, were greatly weakened. The elite spears jolted aside their stellar energy and stabbed into their bodies, raising them high into the air and tossing them away. Squelch, squelch, squelch. In a few short moments, the spear formation was like a forest, constantly lengthening and contracting. Each time it was extended, it was bright, but when it was retracted, it was scarlet. In the blink of an eye, the area around the shieldmen was covered in corpses. The valiant soldiers of the Mengshi, Yusang army were now as limp as rags. Not only that, the shieldmen at the front of the line, who had been under enormous pressure, now sensed that the attacks were greatly weakened, and the line stabilized. Axemen, get out! At some point in time, a series of earth-shattering roars came from all directions at the edge of the battle line. With a furious roar, massive axes spun and flew out, smashing into the dense sea of Mengshi, Yusang soldiers. The moment the axe flew out, the earth quaked in the Great Tang camp. Stalwart figures charged out like the most terrifying of beasts, charging straight at the Mengshi, Yusang army. Kill for me. The strong axemen had ferocious expressions on their faces. Their veins were bulging, and they were clad in sturdy, high-quality armor. The axes in their hands were inscribed with Xianhua patterns, and they were rampaging through the enemy's camp. Ah! Screams filled the air as the Uzan and Mengshi Zhao soldiers were sent flying like straw. Some of the Mengshi Zhao soldiers were even cleaved in two by the axes from left to right. Axemen had always been the strongest of all the infantry soldiers, and they had all been carefully selected. Each axeman was at least at true martial tier 6 or 7, and with the massive weakening effect of Wang Chong's Bane of the Battlefield Halo, one could easily imagine the power of these axemen. In the army, axemen possessed immense offensive power, and they were always used for breaking formations when the odds were against them. Bum bum bum. To the southeast, southwest, northwest, in all directions, the armies that had held the advantage were instantly routed, unable to stop the enemy. What's going on? How can their strength change so quickly? What kind of power can cover such a large area? The changes on the mountain shocked everyone. This was not the first time Wang Chong had used the Bane of the Battlefield Halo, but the first time. It had stopped at the front lines in a battle of tens of thousands of soldiers. But now it was completely different. Even a fool could sense that the Bane of the Battlefield Halo was affecting the entire mountain, and perhaps even far beyond that. Prime Minister, what should we do? All eyes turned to Daluan Ruozhen at the foot of the mountain. Don't worry about it. Such a large halo must consume a lot of energy. Pass on my order, continue the attack. Daluan Ruozhen waved his hand and said without hesitation. Although he didn't know how Wang Chong had done it, to weaken the enemy's halo to such an extent, for Daluan Ruozhen, in this world, there was only one thing that could do it. A halo. But as long as it was a halo, it would consume energy, and the more people it covered, the greater the consumption. Wang Chong's halo covered such a large area. For Daluan Ruozhen, it would not take long for it to run out. More importantly, in a war, no matter how powerful a halo, or how powerful an existence was, in the face of an army of hundreds of thousands, or even millions of soldiers, its effect was negligible. If Huishi Wuzong alone could win the war, what was the point of having others? But soon, Daluan Ruozhen realized that he was wrong. Nay. An impassioned and intense neigh sounded. Under the gazes of countless people, an exceptionally handsome colt with snow-white hooves and beans in its mouth appeared under the flagpole at the top of the mountain. On the back of the horse, the tall and handsome figure was like the sun in the sky, attracting everyone's attention. Chapter 603. Buzz. The air trembled as a halo of thorns began to spread out from the white-hoofed shadow's feet, pouring out like a torrent of water to cover the entire army. The strange halos of thorns began to strengthen the shieldmen, axemen and archers, instantly increasing the strength of the Annam Protectorate. Even Daluan Ruozhen could see that the great Tang army was clearly exuding a completely different aura, a completely different spirit, stronger than before. One was weakening the enemy, while the other was strengthening itself. At this moment, even Daluan Ruozhen couldn't help but widen his eyes. What sort of halo is this? Daluan Ruozhen's mind was in a different state. A normal halo with strength, dexterity, or speed would already be quite decent, but Wang Chong's halo was different. It had 3 aspects that could simultaneously strengthen all 3. In this situation, the 80 to 90,000 soldiers of the Annam Protectorate, combined with the terrain, was enough to make this mountain impenetrable. Send my order to Duan Yangyan. Have him mobilize the elephant army, and immediately break the formation. Daluan Ruozhen's pupils constricted as he issued the order. Wang Chong had many secrets, and in Daluan Ruozhen's understanding, only a great general possessed such a massive halo. And Wang Chong was clearly no great general. Not only that, a halo that increased strength, dexterity, and speed was no ordinary technique. It was extremely rare in any empire, and not even the supreme Great Snow Mountain Temple of the Uzun had many. In addition, the giant army that the Arabs have trained for us should be arriving soon. Have them move out. With these final words, Daluan Ruozhen's eyes turned extremely gloomy. The Uzun and the Arabs had been working together for a very long time, and their cooperation had not been as simple as black kerosene. The giant army was one of them. Roar! An earth-shattering roar suddenly came from afar. The roar contained a strong sense of brutality, wildness, and bloodlust. The voice was as loud as thunder, and it even drowned out the sounds of slaughter and the roar of the giant elephants on the battlefield. The earth rumbled and shook, as if thousands of soldiers and horses were charging over from afar. This huge movement instantly attracted everyone's attention. It also attracted the attention of Wang Chong, who was at the top of the mountain. This is... Wang Chong closed his eyes slightly, and a trace of doubt appeared in his pupils. The war between the Tang dynasty and Mengxizhao and Uzun had been going on for some time now. All the military branches basically had some understanding of each other. However, Wang Chong was sure that he had never felt such an aura before. Buzz! When he saw what had appeared in the distance, even Wang Chong couldn't help but widen his eyes. In the distance, a group of massive figures had appeared on the horizon. The reason why he called them figures and not warriors was because Wang Chong had never seen such a massive human before. The bodies of these creatures were thick and muscular, and even more astonishing was their height. Each of them was 6 to 7 meters tall, 3 to 4 times the height of a normal human. Their skin was pitch black, their expression savage, and they were grotesquely ugly. Moreover, their bodies were covered in thick plate armor, making one shiver in fear. But there was no doubt that they were humans. Ah! Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Cries of alarm came from not the Tang soldiers on the mountain, but the distant Uzun soldiers. When these giants appeared, the wild, savage, and brutal aura they exuded caused even the highland steeds of Uzun's well-trained steeds to yelp in fear and begin to gallop away. Wherever these giants ran, the Uzun soldiers parted like a wave, herding a flock of sheep. Although they were covered in plate armor that weighed nearly 1,000 jin, these giant warriors wielded thick spiked clubs, sticks, spears, and shields, and all of them seemed to be flying. Not even war horses could compare to them. What sort of monsters are these? Chen Shisun's eyes widened. In his month of fighting with Uzun, he had never seen such monsters appear in Uzun. They were not human, but humanoid monsters. Although these monsters were still very far away, the brutal and bloody aura they exuded was so strong that even Chen Shisun couldn't help but feel his heart thump. This had already surpassed the scope of regular warfare. Cindy, although these monsters were very far away, Wang Chong could tell at a glance from their pitch-black skin that these people had originally been the impoverished and destitute Cindy. Connecting this to the massive bodies of these giants, a name immediately appeared in Wang Chong's mind. The Skyquaking Army. Wang Chong muttered to himself as he called out this name. In the history of the human race, whether it was in this world or in other parallel dimensions, humans were restricted by their own bloodlines and bones, so no one would ever be taller than 2 meters. People like the invincible great general Li Sai, who was around 2 meters to 4 meters tall, were already extremely rare. But this did not mean that there were no monsters taller and larger than Li Sai. At the very least in the history that Wang Chong knew, a special army had briefly appeared. The Skyquaking Army. In Wang Chong's memories, in the barren land of Sindha to the west, the Abbasid Caliphate, and the Uzun that bordered Sindha had once worked together to carry out a plan. They sent people into Sindha to pick out talented and young orphans who wandered the world. The Abbasid Caliphate and Uzun had raised these orphans from a young age, feeding them all kinds of medicine, and feeding them the meat of eagles, tigers, lions, and elephants. They had obtained an ancient technique from a declined ancient sect for them to cultivate. At the same time, they had used a special method to stimulate the acupuncture points in their bodies and stimulate their potential. In the end, they had raised a group of incredibly powerful and massive creatures that they called the Skyquaking Army. It was rumored that each soldier of the Skyquaking Army was 7 to 8 meters tall, with some even approaching 10 some meters. The Abbasid Caliphate constantly used special and ancient techniques to stimulate them and increase their strength. Later on, the soldiers of the Skyquaking Army were trained to the point where they could rely on their physical strength to contend against profound martial realm experts, even imperial martial realm experts. They had apparently been trained using a method completely different from the current martial arts system. Wang Chong had never seen these so-called soldiers of the Skyquaking Army, but he had heard many rumors about them. Moreover, the entire continent had laughed off the legend of the Skyquaking giants, believing it to be a complete joke. After all, how could a person be so tall? But Wang Chong was different. Many years after the Battle of Talas, he had gotten close to a deserter from the Anxi Protectorate Army under Gao Xianji's command. According to this deserter, when Gao Xianji was fighting with the Arabian Empire, the Skyquaking Army had appeared in the Arabian Army, and the Annam Protectorate had even fought with them for a short time. Because Gao Xianji had already been defeated at the time, the Skyquaking Army and the Skyquaking giants raised by the Arabs had only appeared for a brief moment, and not many people knew about them. The deserter from the Annam Protectorate Army that Wang Chong had encountered had also quickly disappeared, so there was no way for him to determine the truth. Thus, Wang Chong could not reveal any more information. But Wang Chong had never imagined that the Skyquaking Army would appear here. The Uzun really did collude with the Arabs to create the Skyquaking Army, and the mastermind behind this collusion was actually Daluan Ruozhen. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. He had never imagined that he would encounter the embryonic form of the Skyquaking giants so early on. This was even earlier than the legends said. As expected, Daluan Ruozhen is just like Jelifeng, both ambitious and prepared. Even without the matter with Jelifeng, Daluan Ruozhen would still have sent his soldiers. These soldiers of the Skyquaking Army are the reinforcements they prepared on the plateau. The Annam Protectorate of the Arai was completely wiped out. But in this life, it's completely different standing on the summit, Wang Chong muttered to himself. Because of his interference, the war in the southwest had taken a completely different path from the one he had taken in his last life. First, a sturdy lion city had appeared on the shores of the Arai, and then a month of siege battles had been added. Soon after, he had established yet another steel fortress on this flat land, yet another mountain that the Mengshi, Yusang army could not cross. Now that matters had developed to this point, they had completely deviated from their original trajectory. The Arabs' black kerosene had appeared, and the initial Skyquaking army had also appeared, as had the siege vehicles. Not even Wang Chong had any idea how the War of the Southwest would develop. More importantly, Wang Chong knew why Daluan Ruozhen had sent out these things. This was because whether it was the elephants of the Arai forest, or the Skyquaking giants that the Tibetans and Arabs had trained using secret arts in Sinna, they all used pure physical strength. Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo was completely useless against these Arai elephants and the Skyquaking giants. Roar! With a heaven-shaking roar, the first to charge was not the distant and terrifying Skyquaking giants, but the nearby Arai elephants with their two abnormally long tusks. Boom! The two massive steel walls and the Annam Protectorate behind them were thrown into the air. Two Arai elephants, 8 to 9 meters tall and clad in thick white plate armor, led the army of elephants and Uzun soldiers toward the summit. Chapter 604. But this was not the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing was that these Arai elephants were completely unaffected by the weakening effects of the bane of the battlefield halo. At this moment, they had become the sharpest weapons the Mengshi, Yusang armies were using to break the formation. Roar! With a deafening roar, two massive elephant hooves rose into the air and stomped down on the Annam Protectorate on the edge of the battle line. Ah! Their faces were brimming with fear, but in the face of these fully armored, invulnerable Arai elephants, the Annam Protectorate's resistance was negligible. As the elephants' hooves descended, the Annam Protectorate army soldiers didn't even have time to dodge, and even their armor was crushed into meat paste. Roar! The elephants raised their trunks high and began to rampage through the Tang army on the summit, none of them a match. Roar! Suddenly, a sound wave arrived, the enormous strength contained in this sound wave jolting aside the metal ornaments in the elephants' ears and blasting into their minds. But just when the elephants raised their heads in fright, a metal halberd flew through the air, stabbing deep into the elephants' eyes and into their skulls. The huge elephants' knees went soft, and they knelt heavily on the hillside. Dark red blood gushed out of their eye sockets, and then they stopped moving. Although they possessed powerful vitality and enormous strength, beasts were not humans, and the intelligence of elephants was far inferior to that of humans. In the face of top-class human experts, they were still vulnerable to a single blow. Axemen, Chop off the guards on the elephants' heads. The middle of the mountain was in chaos. A fully armored general was shouting at the top of his lungs, his eyes red with madness. The Annam Protectorate had never been in such a perilous situation. The lives of more than 80,000 soldiers were on the line. If they could not stop this wave of attacks, the entire Annam Protectorate would be wiped out. In order to resist this wave of attacks, all of the generals fought with all their might, using all of their strength. Elephant stabbing guards. Bang! Bang! 2 soldiers of the White Elephant Corps were struck by the spinning axes and dropped from the elephants' heads. A moment later, 2 Tang Dynasty soldiers nimbly climbed up the elephants' trunks. Squelch! 2 sharp swords stabbed into the elephants' eyes. Capture them! Damn it, don't let them get away! Countless sabers, swords, and spears stabbed at the Tang Dynasty soldiers on the elephants' heads. But before they could arrive, the elephant stabbing guards immediately rolled off the elephants' corpses and vanished into the crowd. In these 5 days, Daluan Ruozan and the Mengshi, Yusang army had truly thought of many ways to protect the elephants from the Tang, but Wang Chong had also thought of many ways to deal with the Arai elephants of Mengshi Zhao. Rumble. While the battlefield was in a stalemate, there was a massive boom from the southeast. In the most intense moment of the battle, the Mengshi, Yusang army in the southeast suddenly retreated without warning. All the Annam Protectorate soldiers were stunned, but in the heat of the battle, their bodies couldn't help but follow the pursuit. Interesting, they're copying me. On the summit, Wang Chong was surveying the battlefield. When he saw this sight, his eyes brightened, and he couldn't help but laugh. This scene was incredibly similar. Daluan Ruozan was using the methods he had used against the Mengshi Zhao army against himself. Pass on my order. Have General Luoji move to the southeast. Yes, your subordinate will go. The guard stood up and quickly left to carry out the order. Daluan Ruozan, if you want to use my methods to deal with me, you first have to look at who your opponent is. Wang Chong's lips curled into a cold smile. For Daluan Ruozan to be able to grasp his tactics in such a short time and train an army to deal with him was truly formidable. However, he was still far from being able to use his spear against his shield. Luoji's army was extremely skilled in offense. As long as there was the slightest opportunity, they would not let it go. If the Mengshi, Yusang army revealed an opening in front of him, they would only be humiliating themselves. Wang Chong only needed a glance to know that the level of tactics the Mengshi, Yusang army had displayed was absolutely incapable of dealing with the commander of Luoji's level. It was like how a bag could hold a stick, but not a spear. Turning his gaze away from the southeast, Wang Chong quickly turned his attention to the north. There, an army dressed in dazzling armor of gold and white was charging through the mountains. Even the elites of the Annam Protectorate were incapable of stopping them. The Dragon Sun Corps was the most elite guard of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. Under the leadership of Crown Prince Fenjie, it displayed a terrifying offensive power. Without the protection of the Giant Elephant Corps, or the support of other armies, this corps had already pierced through more than half of the Annam Protectorate's lines. Weapons, equipment, strength, the entire Dragon Sun Corps stood at the apex of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. In terms of individual strength, neither the cavalry of Uzan nor the Annam Protectorate of the Tang Dynasty could compare to the Dragon Sun Corps of Mengshi Zhao. Even Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo was greatly weakened against them, making it far less effective than it was against other armies. The Dragon Sun Corps was the trump card of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. In the Battle of Arai, Jelifeng had used this sharp sword to pierce through the defenses of the Annam Protectorate and crush Xinyu Zhongtong. In the frenzied assault of the Mengshi, Yusang army, the one that posed the greatest threat to the Tang people was not Duan Yangyan's Giant Elephant Corps, but the Dragon Sun Corps led by Fenjie. To Wang Chong, the Dragon Sun Corps was the pawn of the Mengshi, Yusang army that he wanted to eliminate the most. Begin! Wang Chong turned his head to Lin Wuxiu. This general will go. Lin Wuxiu's expression was solemn as he bowed and quickly left, vanishing from the summit. All soldiers hear my order. Everyone obey my orders. Anyone who falls behind will be executed. Fenjie's eyes blazed with an unprecedented fighting intent. His gaze remained fixed on the summit, and in the entire world, he could see nothing but Wang Chong. Kill him. For Jia Siluo, and for myself. Finjie's mind was in turmoil. He was like an arrow released from a bow, never stopping until he had reached his goal. There was only one thought in his mind: eliminate Wang Chong. Crane wing formation. Advance at full speed. Finjie unsheathed his sword, his body covered in blood as he continued forward, stepping over the corpses of the Tang Dynasty soldiers. Behind him, pieces of armor seemed to have a life of their own. They broke free from the corpses and turned into iron men. Clang, clang, clang. Finjie extended a palm, and before the Annam Protectorate soldiers could get close, their swords flew out of their hands, and their armor twisted and deformed as they fell to the ground with screams. Rumble! Just as Finjie was leading the Dragon Sun Legion in a triumphant march, the sound of galloping hooves came from behind him, accompanied by an unending stream of screams. Finjie trembled and turned his head. He saw that a cavalry unit had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and cut Finjie's Dragon Sun Legion in two. The cavalry of the Tang Dynasty. Finjie's pupils constricted, all the hair on his body standing on end. After fighting the Tang Dynasty for so many days, Finjie had never seen the cavalry of the Tang Dynasty. The sudden appearance of this Tang Dynasty cavalry was like a needle stabbed into Finjie's heart. Retreat and defend. Finjie's body went cold as he let out the most mournful howl he had ever let out in his life. For an army to be cut in half at the waist was an extremely dangerous signal to any soldier. If they were cut in half by the Tang Dynasty, half of the Dragon Sun Legion would end up in the Tang Dynasty's pocket. On the first day of the battle, Finjie had personally witnessed the fate of the 8,000 Uzun cavalry that had fallen into the Tang Dynasty's encirclement. If they could not promptly break out of the encirclement, the Dragon Sun Legion would suffer unprecedented damage since its founding. Boom! The nearly 100 metal men were the first to charge back, and then the rest of the Dragon Sun Legion followed suit. Retreat and defend! Retreat and defend! Finjie's horse roared through the entire army into chaos, but it was already too late. Kill! With a heaven-shaking roar, a unit of Tang Dynasty axemen fiercely charged forward, their massive axes whistling through the air as they smashed down. Amongst the infantry, axemen were the most powerful in terms of attack power, and at the same time, they were also the best type of soldier for breaking through defenses. Finjie had never imagined that Wang Chong would use this army to deal with him at this time. Stop them! Finjie's eyes were wide with rage, his entire body filled with an unprecedented tension. But before all of this could begin, there was a scream as the axemen appeared, and another unit of shieldmen charged out from the left. Kill! Battle cries shook the heavens and the earth. The Annam Protectorate, which had been steadily losing ground, suddenly charged from all sides, cold light flashing, and a forest of swords. Not even Finjie knew how many soldiers Wang Chong had prepared to deal with him. Success! In the midst of the chaos, the wild cheers of a Tang Dynasty general suddenly came from behind him. Finjie turned his head. To his left and right, countless soldiers of the Annam Protectorate were cooperating with the Tang Dynasty cavalry. In a short period of time, they had completely surrounded and cut up the Dragon Sun Legion. Damn it, I've been tricked. Finjie was both shocked and furious, his vision going black. He had never imagined that Wang Chong's reaction would be so swift and fierce. By the time he could react, it was already too late. This is what they call the hard but easy to break. On the summit, Wang Chong watched as the army gradually closed in, and the Dragon Sun Legion fell into a tight encirclement. With a sneer, he quickly turned his attention elsewhere. In the end, Finjie was still too young, and his attainments in the art of war were far from his own level. If one could unify the world by relying on a strong army, then wouldn't the Tang Dynasty have already unified the world? What use would they have then for the art of war? The fate of the Dragon Sun Legion had already been decided. To Wang Chong, there was an even more important matter for him to complete. Careful, all soldiers on guard. Put everything on the defense. Chapter 605. Roar. Bestial and savage roars came from the base of the mountain. The earth rumbled, and the heavy footsteps seemed to stomp on everyone's heart. Careful! They're coming! Stop them! We can't let them break through our defense line. At the very front of the battle line, countless soldiers stared at the massive black silhouettes emerging from the roiling dust, their palms drenched in cold sweat. After such a long time, the egg-shaking legion's giants finally rushed over. Bang! A metal cudgel as thick as a thigh howled through the air, its enormous strength sending 5 or 6 Anon Protectorate Army soldiers flying. Before the rest of the soldiers could surround the cudgel, a massive arm grabbed the edge of the steel walls and fiercely pushed aside these massive weights. Aslan Gaddafi Luo, Kelsalai Slap. The massive and ugly sky-quaking giants uttered some inexplicable words as they charged up the mountain. Before their massive bodies, the Anon Protectorate warriors were as insignificant as ants. Bang! 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 The giants charged forward. Whether it was the defense line, the walls, or the massive shields, they were all unable to withstand a single blow. One Tang soldier after another was sent flying, none of them a match for the giants. They weren't even able to slow them down in the slightest. Wherever the giants passed, the Tang people fell into chaos. The eagle. As Wang Chong gazed down the mountain at the fearsome sky-quaking giant, he suddenly said, "The sky-quaking giants are invincible." Your subordinate understands. There was no need for Wang Chong to say more. The eagle unsheathed his Wuxia steel sword and turned behind him, his expression grave. "Zhang Long, Zhaohu, all of you follow me." As Old Eagle spoke, he mounted a warhorse and charged down the mountain. The Black Dragon gang members followed closely behind. All the sky-quaking giants were covered in thick and sturdy floor armor, a defense that Uzun and the Arabs had jointly forged for them. In the entire army, the only weapon that could pierce through this armor was the Wuxia steel swords of Wang Chong's subordinates. Nay, the eagle's warhorse charged down from the top of the mountain, colliding with the earthquake giant at the foot of the mountain. The huge recoil threw the eagle and his warhorse into the air. But the next moment, the eagle did a somersault, the Wuxia steel sword in his hand slashing down at the giant in midair. Roar! A blood-curdling scream came from the giant's mouth. The mountainous figure was filled with terror as it staggered backward. Not far from him, an arm as thick as an adult's waist fell into the dust, blood gushing out. The eagle descended from the sky and crouched on the ground. Looking at the severed arm, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. For a moment, the mountain was deathly still. The countless giants around the eagle were staring at him, their massive eyes staring at the eagle, or more accurately, at the Wuxia steel sword in the eagle's hand. For the first time they showed fear. This was the first time they had seen something in the hands of these weak humans that could harm them. It seems that it's time for me to enter the stage. At the foot of the mountain, in the center of thousands of gazes, a tall and straight figure smiled, and suddenly took a step forward. Rumble! The ground quaked and dust billowed. The entire area, along with the battlefield where hundreds of thousands of soldiers were fighting, trembled violently, as if it were about to shatter. This is... Wang Chong's pupils constricted as he sensed the astonishing tremors coming from behind him. The number of people in the southwest with such a tyrannical aura could be counted on one hand. And in that direction, Wang Chong could only think of one person. Huashu Wuzong. Turning his head, Wang Chong gazed toward the southwest. In the center of the earth, Wang Chong finally saw that figure. From the start of the battle until now, besides that long howl that had interrupted the Arai elephants, Huashu Wuzong had not made any other attacks, nor had he revealed any of his skills or cultivation. Until this moment. Boom! There was nothing in front of him, nothing at all. But the moment he saw Huashu Wuzong, Wang Chong clearly sensed an enormous pressure sweeping over him like a tide. Even from a great distance, Wang Chong could still feel that oppressive pressure, that terrifying power that could explode at any moment like a raging inferno. Buzz! It was only a tiny bit of power, but Wang Chong could clearly see a vast azure light shoot up from Huashu Wuzong's head. This invisible yet tangible power was like a sharp sword, stirring up the dark clouds overhead. So powerful, Wang Chong's eyes widened as he felt an unprecedented pressure. There were many legends about Huashu Wuzong. Although there were many things that could not be verified, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. Huashu Wuzong was an imperial great general of the Uzan Empire, a saint martial expert. Although the legends of the Tang dynasty said that of the experts of the three kingdoms, Jelifeng, Duangqichuan, Huashu Wuzong, and Zhangqiu Jinqiong, the strongest had to be the tiger of the empire, Zhangqiu Jinqiong, but Huashu Wuzong was definitely not too far off. Alas, Zhangqiu Jinqiong isn't here. Wang Chong's heart was heavy. His father's strength was definitely not enough to contend against Huashu Wuzong, and Xinyu Zhongtong was no match for Duangqichuan. The two of them were still some distance away from the imperial great general level. The only thing that could make the Annam Protectorate stand against the Mengshi Yusang army was the Tang dynasty's numerous generals and formations. This was the greatest characteristic of the Tang dynasty when it came to foreign conquests, and it was also the method that the Tang dynasty used to protect itself against foreign experts. Chong'er, no matter what happens next, you must not get close. This is a battle between us and Huashu Wuzong. A familiar voice sounded in his ear. Wang Yan's voice was calm and steady, and it even faintly revealed some sort of awareness. Civil officials do not love wealth, but generals do not fear death. This was the understanding that every general on a foreign campaign should have. Huashu Wuzong was the most formidable opponent that Wang Yan had ever encountered, and this was definitely not their first battle. But no matter what, Wang Yan would not cower. The more than 80,000 Tang dynasty soldiers would not make him cower. Father! Wang Chong stared at his father's back, his mind in agitation. His father had always given him a cold and harsh impression. He rarely smiled or showed any emotion. But this time, Wang Chong felt something completely different. My strength is still too lacking. I have to get stronger as quickly as possible. Father, be at ease. No matter what, I won't let you fight alone. In the howling winds, Wang Chong clenched his fists, his long hair dancing in the wind. Ever since his reincarnation, his strength had advanced very quickly. To an ordinary person, this was completely unimaginable, but in a battle of this level, he was still far too weak. There's only one way left. In a flash, a thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind. He remembered the Stone of Destiny's bane of all generals. No matter what Wang Chong thought, on the other side, Wang Yan and Huashu Wuzong's movements attracted the attention of the entire battlefield. Wang Yan, are you still going to put up a stubborn resistance? A thunderous voice swept through the sky above the mountain, echoing throughout the entire battlefield. Huashu Wuzong looked at Wang Yan, who was at the top of the mountain, and the densely packed generals of the Tang dynasty, who surrounded him like stars surrounding the moon. Huashu Wuzong had the ghost of a smile on his face. Up until now, no matter what strategy Wang Chong used, no matter how many losses he suffered in the early stages, Huashu Wuzong did not care too much. Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. No matter how the people of the Central Plains viewed a war, to Huashu Wuzong, a war would always be decided by the battle between the top forces of both sides. As long as he killed Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong, the entire Annam Protectorate would collapse without a fight. If the great general wants a battle, Wang Yan will naturally accompany you, Wang Yan said calmly. His rumbling voice resounded through the entire sky. His voice was not overbearing, but it had a tenacity and boldness that could not be shaken by anything. He was like a rock in the middle of a river, fearless in the face of thousands of huge waves. He was like a lush green bamboo, unbending in the face of a violent storm. Wang Gengji is indeed worthy of being the descendant of a general. Just this alone makes him worthy of being my opponent. A strange look flashed through Huashu Wuzong's eyes. The breadth of mind and boldness that Wang Yan displayed was something that even he, a general of the Uzan, could not help but admire. If that's the case, then let's fight. With a clang, Huashu Wuzong unsheathed his long saber and strode forward. Behind him, thick smoke billowed and warhorses neighed. The most elite guards under Huashu Wuzong, along with all the remaining Uzan Iron cavalry, formed an army of more than 100,000 and swept toward the top of the mountain. The atmosphere there was earth-shattering and extremely frightening. Up to this point in the battle, Huashu Wuzong had finally mobilized his entire army. Spread out. A stern shout came from the top of the mountain, and in an instant, the army parted like waves. The 40,000 troops of the Tang dynasty, that had not been involved in the battle since the beginning of the war, also began to move. Buzz! Several dozen streams of energy soared into the sky. As countless people watched, a pitch-black horse like a dragon leaped down from the summit. Wang Yan took the lead, leading the countless elite generals of the Tang dynasty toward Huashu Wuzong. Huashu Wuzong was an Uzun great general. No one in the southwest was a match for him, and no defense line could stop him. To a supreme expert like Huashu Wuzong, the steel walls that Wang Chong had erected on the mountain were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. Boom! Wang Yan stomped down, and several dozen Mengshi, Yusang soldiers on the mountain walls screamed as they were sent flying like ragdolls. Just like the soldiers of the Tang dynasty could not stop Huashu Wuzong, the soldiers of the Uzun and Mengshi Zhao could not stop Wang Yan. Retreat! Chapter 606. This battle drew the attention of countless people. Uzun, Mengshi Zhao, and countless generals of the Tang dynasty all looked over. This battle that had yet to begin was even more important than their own battle. Boom! The wind howled and dust billowed, filling the world. In the deepest part of the dust, a purplish-green saber energy tore through the void. It was 100 zhang long, cleaving through the void as it slashed toward Wang Yan and the others on the mountain. Wherever the saber energy passed, huge black cracks appeared in the air. This saber energy caused everyone's expression to change. In the entire Annam Protectorate, whether it was Luoji or Chen Shusun, they were all insignificant before this saber energy. This was not something that any general could block. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, just as Huashu Wuzong attacked, the mountain suddenly changed. Rumble! As countless people watched in shock, the halos of Wang Yan and the several dozen generals of the Tang dynasty flashed. The halos suddenly blazed with light, and in the blink of an eye, they merged into one, transforming into a giant golden armored god that stood up from the mountain. Mighty miracle god! Wang Chong's heart surged, and a thought flashed through his mind. The Tang dynasty possessed several powerful formations that could gather the strength of other generals, or even an entire army, to form an extremely powerful existence. The mighty miracle god formation was one of them, and it was the most powerful force in the army under Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan. Wang Chong had only heard of it in the past, but had never seen it for himself. This was the first time Wang Chong had seen his father use the mighty miracle god formation. Boom! An earth-shattering boom rang out, shaking heaven and earth, and the entire mountain range trembled. Wang Chong gazed into the distance and saw that under the gloomy sky, the mighty miracle god had joined his palms together and blocked Huashu Wuzong's earth-shattering saber strike. Without the slightest hesitation, the mighty miracle god raised his mountainous right hand at the same time. He blocked the saber strike and punched heavily at the place where Huashu Wuzong was. Before his fist had even landed, the tremendous force of his punch had already caused the air within a radius of several thousand feet to completely disappear. The earth rumbled and emitted bursts of unbearable rumbling, as if it would split apart at any moment. Just as Huashu Wuzong was about to perish under the mighty miracle god's fist, a brilliant golden light suddenly erupted, and an earth-shattering Buddhist chant rang out between heaven and earth. TSK. Well. And I. Pa. Me. Hum. A series of inexplicable incantations rang out between heaven and earth. Right before everyone's eyes, a golden Buddha over 100 feet tall with scorching red flames rose from the ground, where Huashu Wuzong had been standing just a moment ago. Boom! The golden Buddha that was over 100 feet tall raised a single palm to block the mighty miracle heavenly god's sure kill attack. Boom! The earth crumbled, and debris and rocks shot up into the air like a waterfall of several hundred feet. All of the nearby war horses neighed in anguish as they were tossed into the air, torn to shreds by the stellar energies of the battle. The destructive power of the battle struck fear into the hearts of everyone who saw it. Great Sun Buddha Golden Body Mantra. Huashu Wuzong has finally used it. In a place where no one could see, the great general of Mengshi Zhao, Duangqichuan, stared at the golden Buddha over 100 feet tall, and a long-awaited smile appeared on his face. The Great Sun Buddha Golden Body Mantra was one of the supreme techniques of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. In all of the Uzun Empire, only great generals could cultivate this technique. The great generals of Uzun all cultivated different techniques. Outsiders would never have the chance to see them, and this was Duangqichuan's first time seeing one. The supreme techniques of the Great Snow Mountain Temple truly are formidable. Duangqichuan subconsciously turned his gaze to another part of the summit. There, the newly appointed Anan Protector General was standing motionlessly. A large number of generals gathered around him. The only ones in the army that had not moved were him and Xinyu Zhongtong. The Annam Protectorate's Vajra God and Wang Yan's Mighty Miracle God were the two mountains that stood between the Mengshi, Yusang army. In the defeat at Arai, Duangqichuan had already seen Xinyu Zhongtong's Vajra God. The Vajra God was reputed to be the strongest formation of the southwest. If the person using it had been Xinyu Zhongtong, Duangqichuan would definitely have retreated. But Xinyu Zhongtong's strength wasn't even 70% of Zhangqiu Jinxiong's, so Duangqichuan naturally had nothing to fear. He couldn't do anything to Xinyu Zhongtong, and Xinyu Zhongtong couldn't do anything to him. This was why the two of them had bided their time and allowed Wang Yan and Huashu Wuzong to fight. Boom! While Wang Yan's army was fiercely clashing with Huashu Wuzong, the sounds of fighting came from another direction. Wang Chong turned his head and saw that hundreds of thousands of soldiers were using this chance to surge up the mountain. Daluan Ruozan. Wang Chong's pupils constricted, and as he looked through the air, he saw a familiar figure in the dense army at the base of the mountain, dressed in an azure robe and holding a feather fan. It was none other than Daluan Ruozan. Only Daluan Ruozan could use this chance to draw the attention of Wang Yan and Huashu Wuzong to launch an attack. The army of hundreds of thousands was like a vast sea, and in the blink of an eye, a powerful pressure washed over them. As expected, this was where Daluan Ruozan was primarily attacking. He had used the direction of his father and Huashu Wuzong as bait. Wang Chong could smell danger. All soldiers, listen up. Get into position. Archers, get ready. Wang Chong's loud voice resounded across the entire battlefield. Hua! Following Wang Chong's voice, the entire mountain peak suddenly fell silent. All the soldiers and generals seemed to have frozen in place, and an austere aura soared into the sky. What no one knew was that Wang Chong's myriad stars formation had already started to operate. Although it wasn't a complete state, and was only in its embryonic form, in Wang Chong's hands, it was enough to display a portion of its combat power. Prime Minister. At the base of the mountain, an elderly Uzun elder stood together with Daluan Ruozan with a worried expression. This was a tribal elder of the Uzun Plateau. Whenever the Uzun went to war, there would occasionally be a few wise tribal elders who would follow him. Wang Chong's commands had left a deep impression on this elder, and it had also made him wary of the Tang dynasty youth on the summit. There's no way out. Wang Zhongxi is already on his way to Longxi. If the great General King also fails, Geshu Han will lead his army south, and our operation will be a complete failure. There are sacrifices in war, and no matter what, we must win this war. Daluan Ruozan stood at the base of the mountain, his eyes shining with unprecedented resolve. At this moment, he didn't seem like a civil minister, but a fierce general. The art of war of the Central Plains says that we should multiply the enemy, and we have far more soldiers than they do. This is our greatest advantage right now. No matter what kind of military strategy he has, as long as we maintain our absolute advantage and continue to exert pressure on him, compressing his space, in the end, all of his military strategies will collapse. This is our greatest weapon to destroy them. This, I understand. Chapter 607. Boom! Without the slightest hesitation, the two armies crashed against the mountain like howling waves. This was the most intense clash since the start of the battle. Other than Jelifeng and Duangqichuan, the rest of the army of more than 400,000 had been thrown into the battle. This time, Daluan Ruozan did not use any tactics. He simply pushed forward, using his overwhelming strength to push his way up the mountain. When one's army far outnumbered the other, numbers became the greatest tactic, the greatest strategy. Kill! Kill! A series of earth-shattering shouts rang out, and the rolling black steel wave was enough to make everyone's expression change in horror. Ready! Ready! Forward! Wang Chang's voice resounded over the mountain. The first to attack was not the surging Mengxi, Yusang army, but the Annam Protectorate on the summit. Swish swish swish. The first volley of arrows howled through the air, landing in the middle of this flood of steel. Bang! Like a boulder falling into a river, countless arrows pierced through necks, cheeks, knees, and bodies. Hundreds of Mengxi, Yusang soldiers immediately collapsed to the ground, the flood of Mengxi, Yusang soldiers immediately falling into disorder. Swish swish swish. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves. Countless arrows rained down in a concentrated manner, and the chaos continued to increase. It's useless. When the number of soldiers reaches a certain level, local victories and defeats are no longer important. Daluan Ruozhen looked up the mountain, his eyes calm. In an army of 100 soldiers, if 100 died, it would be a complete wipeout. In an army of 200, if 100 died, it would be a heavy injury. In an army of 1,000, it would be a setback. And when the number increased to several thousand, or even tens of thousands, the effect would be negligible. The damage caused by Wang Chang's archers was insignificant to the army of hundreds of thousands. However, Daluan Ruozhen had still underestimated Wang Chang's strategic intentions. As waves of arrows rained down, Wang Chang immediately activated the Myriad Stars formation when the hundreds of thousands of black steel torrents were thrown into disorder and revealed a slight flaw. The tens of thousands of soldiers of the Annam Protectorate were like countless torrents of water, constantly crisscrossing, colliding, and crashing into each other like ropes as they charged down the mountain toward the Mengxi, Yusang army. Congratulations to user for killing 12,000 Mengxi, Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 33,000 Mengxi, Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 88,000 Mengxi, Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 34,000 Mengxi, Yusang soldiers. In a few short moments, a string of voices poured out of Wang Chang's mind like a waterfall. Countless halos were clattering and colliding on the surface of the mountain. Attack halos, strength halos, speed halos, strength halos, defense halos, charge halos. Hundreds of thousands of different war halos covered every inch of the mountain. The intensity of this battle had far surpassed anyone's imagination. Not even Wang Chang had expected it to be this intense. Wang Chang's Myriad Stars formation was like the sharpest of ropes, slicing apart the Mengxi, Yusang army, surrounding it, and then constantly harvesting it. The Mengxi, Yusang army was felled like wheat, and the data pouring down from Wang Chang's mind clearly displayed the severity of the Mengxi, Yusang army's losses. Daluan Ruozhen seemed to have made the ultimate decision. He was using massive casualties to reduce the space the Tang army had to maneuver. As wave after wave of Mengxi, Yusang soldiers fell, the other armies in the rear would quickly take their place. This method was simple, cruel, and extremely effective. After paying a heavy price, the Tang army's space to maneuver had been squeezed to the limit. At this point, not even Wang Chang had much room to maneuver. When faced with a fierce, valiant, decisive, and daring enemy commander, who disregarded sacrifice and cost, even Wang Chang's art of war was no longer as easy to deal with. Against such an opponent, even Wang Chang couldn't help but feel a sense of solemnity. "My lord, we've paid a heavy price." The old chief found it hard to maintain his composure as he watched the soldiers fall in droves. At the base of the mountain, he could clearly see a bloody torrent cascading down from the summit. The intensity of the battle was beyond imagination. The earth of the mountain had already been dyed red by the blood of the soldiers. At this point, it was no longer clear whether this was the Mengxi, Yusang armies, or the Annam protectorates. "There's nothing to be done. This is a price we must pay." Daluan Ruozhen slightly closed his eyes. Not even he could remain calm in the intensity of the battle. The fighting power displayed by the Annam protectorate on the mountain had already surpassed imagination. Not even Zhangqiu Jinxiong, who had been in charge of the Ngari royal lineage for decades, had been able to force him to this state. But all of this was a price that had to be paid. Human wave tactics, this sort of Tang dynasty is truly too unsettling. If the Tang dynasty has a few more talents like this, the Uzun will never be able to contend against it. Dalawan Ruozan looked at the summit, a sliver of unease in his heart. As the war in the southwest continued, not even Dalawan Ruozan realized that his original goal had changed from exterminating the more than 80,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers to eliminating that Wang Chong who had appeared out of nowhere. In the depths of Dalawan Ruozan's mind, eliminating Wang Chong was a higher priority than even the Annam Protectorate. But it just so happened that Dalawan Ruozan could not reveal any of these thoughts. Wang Chong's vigilance was far more formidable than anyone could imagine. Putting aside the fact that he was surrounded by layers upon layers of Annam Protectorate soldiers, the slightest hint that Wang Chong might throw caution to the wind and flee if the situation turned for the worse. Having seen Wang Chong disguise himself as an Uzun soldier to attack Meng Shizhao, as well as disguise himself as a Meng Shizhao soldier to attack Uzun, Dalawan Ruozan actually had no confidence in being able to keep him here. Rumble, the battle was still going on. In the south, the gigantic mighty miracle god and the golden Vairocana Buddha were engaged in a fierce battle on the mountain range. A golden halo that resembled the radiant sun faintly appeared behind the Vairocana Buddha's neck, and behind him, a gigantic snowy mountain faintly appeared. This was a supreme technique of the Great Snow Mountain Temple being used to its fullest potential. Buzz! Stellar energy gathered from all around, strengthening the halo and the image of the snow mountain behind the dignified and divine Vairocana Buddha. Although the Uzun Empire did not have a supreme battle technique like the mighty miracle god formation, it still had techniques and artifacts that could borrow the strength of its soldiers. Even though it was of a much lower level than the mighty miracle god formation, it was still a powerful formation. Nay, behind Huashu Wuzong, highland steeds neighed miserably as they fell to the ground, and the usually ferocious Uzun soldiers also collapsed to the ground, as if all their strength had been sucked out. At the same time, opposite Huashu Wuzong, the Annam Protectorate was not in a good situation either. Clang clang clang, the halo vibrated, and the auras of countless Annam Protectorate soldiers visibly weakened. The mighty miracle god formation could not only absorb the strength of other generals, but it could also absorb the strength of other soldiers. This was also the reason why Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong were able to resist Huashu Wuzong and Duan Gichuan through the formation. The battle in the south was in a stalemate, and on the other side, the battle between Wang Chong and Dalawan Ruozan had also entered a white-hot stage. Warning! 1280 Annam Protectorate casualties. Warning! 2314 Annam Protectorate casualties. Warning! 3215 Annam Protectorate casualties. Warning! 3847 Annam Protectorate casualties. A string of warnings rang out in Wang Chong's mind. Dalawan Ruozan's strategy had finally begun to show results, and Wang Chong's Annam Protectorate was beginning to suffer heavy casualties. This was a contest of wills, and the effects of strategy and strategy were becoming extremely small. Dalawan Ruozan's Mengshi, Yusang army continued to surge up the mountain. No matter how much resistance they encountered, it seemed like they would never stop. No matter how many casualties there would always be more soldiers surging up the mountain. But the 40,000 soldiers commanded by Wang Chong displayed a different side. They were callous and calm, like a rock before the raging waves. No matter how many Mengshi, Yusang soldiers surged forward, they would never retreat. Whether it was Wang Chong or Dalawan Ruozan, both sides had suffered heavy casualties. Cavalry, mount your horses! At the most intense moment of the battle, Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he suddenly mounted the white-hoofed Shadow's horse. Behind him, war horses neighed as one powerful Tang dynasty cavalry after another leaped onto the summit. Clang! Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong unsheathed his Wuxia steel sword. Lin Wuxiao, I'll leave the command to you. Nay. The white-hoofed Shadow let out a heaven-shaking neigh, as it led the 2000-some Tang dynasty cavalry down the mountain like a bolt of lightning. At this point, all of the Tang dynasty's reserves had been used up. Rumble. No one could describe the impact Wang Chong's 2,000-strong cavalry had inflicted on the Mengshi, Yusang army. Wang Chong had chosen precisely where the Mengshi, Yusang army was lacking in soldiers, its weakest point. The rapid charge of the cavalry, the amplification of the terrain and the halo of Dusk Stallion had transformed Wang Chong's 2,000-strong cavalry into the sharpest blade, piercing through the entire Mengshi, Yusang army. Rumble. The entire mountain was thrown into chaos. Wang Chong's myriad stars formation had already been exerting a constant pressure, but Wang Chong's 2,000-strong cavalry had become the straw that broke the camel's back. Ah! Screams resounded from the summit as the Mengshi, Yusang army fell into chaos. Wang Chong's myriad stars formation pushed forward, and countless Uzun and Mengshi Zhao soldiers fell to the ground. Congratulations to user for killing 78615 Mengshi, Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 86135 Mengshi, Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 91543 Mengshi, Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 98712 Mengshi, Yusang soldiers. A string of voices washed over Wang Chong's mind like a waterfall, and when all the voices reached their peak, something completely unexpected occurred to Wang Chong. Congratulations to user for killing more than 200,000 foreign soldiers. The conditions for advancement have been met, and the bane of the battlefield halo has been upgraded to the 3rd level. Chapter 608. No one could describe the transformation that had taken place at this moment. Metal clanged against metal as the intense battlefield suddenly fell silent. More than half of the tens of thousands of war halos instantly dimmed, like extinguished candles. Some of the heavily injured Mengshi, Yusang soldiers even dropped below the true martial realm under the effects of the bane of the battlefield halo. Damn it! What's going on here? The Mengshi, Yusang soldiers were stunned as if they had seen a ghost. The drop of strength from the true martial realm to the origin energy realm was a massive transformation. It was like a muscular man capable of lifting up a mountain had suddenly become a child without the strength to truss a chicken. The difference was extremely obvious. The effects of the bane of the battlefield halo reaching the 3rd layer were so great that even some of the generals revealed shocked expressions. They were the most sensitive to the changes in their surroundings. Damn it! It's that foul brat again. Countless gazes converged on the summit, and even Jelifeng couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Wang Chong's existence had already become the greatest variable in the War of the Southwest. His influence was no longer limited to 1 or 2 soldiers or commanders, but to the outcome of the entire battlefield. How could there be such a halo in this world? Why have I never heard of it before? Jelifeng, Duan Gichuan, and Daluan Ruozan all had the same thought. But regardless of what they were thinking, Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo's 3rd layer was already producing an avalanche of effects. The Mengshi, Yusang army on the surface of the mountain was thrown into chaos, and this effect was even affecting Huashu Wuzong and the Uzun soldiers behind him. Huashu Wuzong had been using the secret arts of the Great Snow Mountain Temple this entire time to absorb the strength of the Uzun soldiers behind him. When Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo was applied to these soldiers and weakened them, even Huashu Wuzong was affected. For a moment, he seemed to be unable to hold back the mighty miracle god. Damn it! Huashu Wuzong's expression also changed slightly. He never thought that Wang Chong's halo could actually affect him. In such a high-level battle, this was very fatal. Kill! The thousands of Annam Protectorate soldiers used this chance to charge down from the summit, causing Uzun and Mengshi Zhao's armies to collapse. Just when it seemed like the Mengshi, Yusang army was about to be completely routed, a massive boom came from the summit. Rumble! Dust billowed from the top of the mountain, and the huge commotion caused the entire mountain to tremble slightly. Not good. This direction. Wang Chong was charging through the crowd when he heard this voice. His expression flickered, and he reined in the white-hoofed shadow, vaguely thinking of something. The top of the mountain was filled with the warriors of the Annam Protectorate. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any changes there. And this direction was clearly, "Young master, this is bad. Uzun has sent people to destroy our water source." A dusty horseman charged down the mountain like a bolt of lightning. Before the horse had even come to a stop, a pale-faced guard kneeled in front of Wang Chong's horse. What? Like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky, Wang Chong's entire body swayed, as if he had been plunged into an icy cavern. "Daluan Ruozhen." Wang Chong turned his gaze to Huashu Wuzong at the base of the mountain. "I've been tricked." This was the only thought in Wang Chong's mind. As if confirming Wang Chong's conjecture, a resounding yak horn suddenly blared from the camp at the base of the mountain. At this moment, Daluan Ruozhen finally gave the order to retreat. "Take me there." With no time to think, Wang Chong turned his horse around and followed the guard up the mountain. On the mountain slope, the Annam Protectorate was chasing after them. However, Wang Chong's attention had already shifted to another place. "Young master, look." At the back of the mountain, a cave had completely collapsed. Countless water sources flowed down the mountain like a waterfall. Uzun's people used a boulder to reach here. They smashed the cave and dug out the water stored inside. They even poisoned the water. The guard explained with a pale face. Wang Chong turned his head and saw the boulder that the guard was talking about not far away. "You're saying that they fell from the sky on a boulder and landed here?" "Yes, young master." Wang Chong instantly fell silent. Falling from the sky on a boulder was simply wishful thinking. Even if they landed safely, they would definitely be severely injured. These are men of sacrifice. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. To use this method to transport soldiers, Wang Chong had to admit that Daluan Ruozhen's method was something that he had never thought of. Without a doubt, these soldiers were prepared to die on the mountain peak. With this thought in mind, Wang Chong's eyes scanned the surroundings, and indeed found a few corpses. "The mountain peak is filled with our people. When we discovered these people, we had already taken action. Unfortunately, it was still too late." The guard said with a face full of shame. "There are a total of 17 water sources on the mountain. How many of them have been contaminated like this?" "A total of 8. Wang Chong's face darkened. His heart suddenly felt heavy. By now, he had completely understood Daluan Ruozhen's scheme. A frontal battle was not his goal. Even Huashu Wuzong's attack was just bait. His true goal was the water sources on the mountain. To use hundreds of thousands of soldiers as chess pieces. Wang Chong had to admit that he had underestimated the resolve, capability, and charisma of this Uzun Prime Minister. "I've been underestimating him all along. No wonder a civil minister like him could stand on equal footing with Zhangqiu Jinqiong, Jelifeng, and Huashu Wuzong in the southwest. Zhangqiu Jinqiong has always been ambitious, and has always wanted to achieve something in the southwest, but in the end, he achieved nothing in the past decade. So that's why Zhangqiu Jinqiong had always been known as the Tiger of the Empire. But in the capital, be it the prestigious clans or the nobles, they all had some reservations about him. This was because his reputation was not proportional to his achievements. Wang Chong had also had this misunderstanding about him in the past, but at this moment, Wang Chong suddenly understood the situation Zhangqiu Jinqiong was in. Daluan Ruozhen was not the sort of person that could make others feel apprehensive and wary of him from the very start. Not only that, the vast majority of those who faced him would even think of him as mediocre and unworthy of his reputation. And Daluan Ruozhen's true attack would often come at this moment, a fatal blow that would catch one off guard. "Water source! Water source!" Wang Chong suddenly raised his head and let out a long sigh. Daluan Ruozhen had given him a truly difficult problem, and at this moment, Wang Chong had no other choice. At the base of the mountain, the armies of Uzun and Mengshi Zhao had all retreated, leaving behind a mountain of corpses. "How is it?" Daluan Ruozhen asked in concern. Although his strategic objective had been achieved, Daluan Ruozhen was not the slightest bit happy. Uzun and Mengshi Zhao had combined an army of nearly 500,000, commanded by imperial great generals like Huashu Wuzong and Duan Gichuan, assisted by him and Jelifeng, and supported by the logistical support of the entire Mengshi Zhao Empire. Yet in the end, they had still been forced to rely on their advantage in numbers and sacrifice. This was simply unimaginable to Daluan Ruozhen. Wang Chong had relied on his inferior army to force this prime minister of the Ngari royal lineage, whose name resounded throughout the Uzun Plateau, into desperate straits. 123,400. The messenger accurately read out a number. Buzz. Even though he had mentally prepared himself, upon hearing this number, Daluan Ruozhen still couldn't help but feel his heart sink. Of the more than 400,000 soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army, more than 120,000 had died in this battle, more than a quarter of their strength. This was an unbearable weight. This number far surpassed Daluan Ruozhen's bottom line. How could there be so many? Is this number accurate? Daluan Ruozhen said, his complexion unsightly. Replying to Prime Minister, "We've already counted 5 times. The messenger lowered his head. How many soldiers did the Tang dynasty lose? It's impossible to count, but I estimate the death toll to be between 23,000 and 24,000. Daluan Ruozhen closed his eyes, unable to speak for a long time. Pass on my order to have the entire army prepare. In addition, have Great General Huoshu Wuzong accompany me to see the commander of the Tang dynasty. Young master, look down the mountain. There's activity. On the summit, Eagle's sharp eyes suddenly pointed down the mountain. Wang Chong's brow creased as he stood up. The battle has only just ended. What does he want to do now? Young Master Wang, can we meet and have a chat? A resonant voice came from the base of the mountain. From the summit, one could see the dense ranks of the Mengshi Yusang army parting like a wave, and the figures of Daluan Ruozhen and Huoshu Wuzong were once more reflected in everyone's eyes. But unlike the first time, Daluan Ruozhen and Huoshu Wuzong's expressions were a little less relaxed and carefree, a little more solemn and respectful. We've already come this far. Does the great minister still want to play any tricks? Wang Chong circulated his energy through his dantian, his eyes bright as he fearlessly looked down the mountain. Young master is too serious. In front of young master, how could Ruozhen possibly play any tricks? Daluan Ruozhen sincerely said. Young master has already seen the result of this battle. The Annam Protectorate's water supply will not last more than 3 days. For the sake of Uzun, for young master's sake, and for the sake of the Annam Protectorate, Daluan Ruozhen wishes to sincerely discuss a matter with young master. Just what does this Daluan Ruozhen want to do? This time, even the recuperating Wang Yan and Xin Yu Zhongtong couldn't help but look at each other in dismay, their brows furrowed. They had been fighting with the Mengshi Yusang army for more than a month now, but Daluan Ruozhen's attitude had always been aggressive and unrelenting. This was the first time the two had seen such a humble and modest attitude in front of Daluan Ruozhen. There's no need for Prime Minister to worry about the matter of the water supply. Prime Minister, if you have something to say, just say it. Wang Chong calmly said. Young Master Wang, I will say the same thing again. If the Annam Protectorate and young master are willing to surrender, I can guarantee that young master and all the warriors of the Annam Protectorate will receive appropriate treatment. Although we cannot allow young master and the warriors of the Annam Protectorate to return to the Tang dynasty, young master and all the warriors will be able to live out the rest of their lives on the Uzun Plateau. No one will be harmed. This is the best outcome for young master and for our Uzun. I hope that young master can seriously consider this. This way, we can avoid many unnecessary sacrifices. With these final words, Daluan Ruozhen put down the feather fan in his hand and looked at Wang Chong on the summit, his expression incomparably sincere. The entire battlefield was deathly silent. Jelifeng, Duan Gichuan, and Huoshu Wuzong, these titans of the southwest, who should have been vehemently opposed, all chose to remain silent at this moment. The strong would only respect the strong. In this battle, the casualties of the Mengshi Yusang army had even surpassed those of the Annam Protectorate. These titans of the southwest had never imagined this. The summit was quiet, everyone waiting for Wang Chong's reply. Chong'er, make your own decision. Young Master Chong, there's no need to feel apprehensive. Right now, you are the highest commander of the Annam Protectorate. Whether it's war or peace, young master can make his own decisions. At the same time, Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong spoke at Wang Chang's ear. They did not speak too much, but the two had used their actions to fully express their support for Wang Chong. Heh! In the breeze, Wang Chong grinned and raised his head. Was this a very difficult choice to make? At this stage of the Southwestern War, it was already a battle to the death. There was no other path of retreat or choice. The Tang dynasty could not lose, the Annam Protectorate could not lose, and Wang Chong could not lose. And did Daluan Ruozhen really think that he had already won? Prime Minister, have you ever heard of this saying? Wang Chong looked down the mountain and suddenly laughed. What? Daluan Ruozhen's pupils constricted. For Wang Chong to still be able to laugh at a time like this, and even have the leisure to mention other things, was truly beyond his expectations. Whoever laughs in the end laughs the best. Daluan Ruozhen, Jelifeng, and Huashu Wuzong were all flabbergasted. Jelifeng had a deep understanding of the Tang dynasty, but she had never heard of such a thing before. Jiai, you've been studying in the Tang dynasty for many years. Have you ever heard someone say such a thing? Zhao Yuofeng looked to the side at the bandaged Fenjie and asked in confusion. Your child has never heard of such a thing. Fenjie lowered his head. Everyone was baffled by Wang Chong's words. Ha, Prime Minister. Until the final moment of this war, it's too early to say who will win. Wang Chong heartily laughed. Without waiting for Daluan Ruozhen to ask any more questions, he flicked his sleeve and left, vanishing from the summit. Chapter 609. Prime Minister, what does this brat mean by this? He's already at this level? Does he still have some tricks up his sleeve? Longkinba turned his head to look at Daluan Ruozhen. His battle with Sun Luyue had consumed a great deal of stellar energy, and his armor was covered in scars, many of which had even been cut open, revealing the mangled flesh beneath. But even so, Longkinba had still maintained a vigorous fighting spirit. Daluan Ruozhen said nothing while Huashu Wuzong slightly frowned. In the past, he might not have been so dismissive of Wang Chong, but he would have only given him a few more glances, just a few glances. But now was different. Wang Chong's battle halos could even have a significant effect on his Vairocana Buddha. And if what Wang Chong said was true, and he felt that he could win this battle, not even Huashu Wuzong could maintain his composure. Although he didn't care about Wang Chong's individual strength, he couldn't help but care about the outcome of this battle. After all, his mission as a general was not to defeat his opponent, but to win. Daluan Ruozhen, what do you think he means by this? To Huashu Wuzong's flabbergasted gaze, Huashu Wuzong actually turned to Daluan Ruozhen. My lord, do you really think that he can win? Longkinba called out, a look of disbelief on his face. It's better to believe that it's true than not. Daluan Ruozhen deeply creased his brow, a pensive look on his face. You've seen this brat's abilities. Although not every word he says is true, not every word he says is false. Moreover, at this stage, there's no need for him to use these little tricks. Pass on my order. All soldiers are to be on guard. In this period of time, have 10 groups of soldiers take turns keeping an eye on the Tang people. In addition, use kerosene to set up a campfire in the camp. All the blind spots must be illuminated. When the patrols go in and out, including Meng Shizhao's men, use the secret code. We can't give them the slightest opportunity. It had not been long since Wang Chong led the Tang people to disguise themselves as Meng Shizhao's people to attack Uzan. Daluan Ruozhen did not want to make any mistakes at this time. If they allowed Wang Chong to successfully raid the camp and snatch more water, the chances of the Uzan Empire's strategy failing would increase with every day of delay. Wang Zhongxi had left the capital of the Tang dynasty. The current situation was completely different from the beginning. Now Daluan Ruozhen was more anxious than Jelifeng. Yes, your subordinate obeys. As soon as Daluan Ruozhen's voice fell, a few Uzan messengers quickly received the order and left. General, what should we do now? On the other side, in a tent far away from Uzan's people, no one expected that two figures were gathered together. One was the ruler of Meng Shizhao, and the other was the general of Meng Shizhao. At this time, even Crown Prince Feng was excluded, and had no chance to meet them, let alone others. Your Majesty, you have seen the fighting power of the Tang people in today's battle. If we attack them by force, I'm afraid that we will suffer heavy losses. Even if we succeed, we will have to pay a huge price. The loss outweighs the gain. Daluan Ruozen has already destroyed their water source. On this point, Daluan Ruozen and I have the same view. Let's call a truce for 3 days. Although we don't have much time left, we have to wait. Duan Gichuan's voice came from the tent. The only general of Mengshi Zhao had been hiding behind the scenes, and was a man of few words. It was not until now that it was revealed that the real commander of this battle was actually Duan Gichuan, not Jelifeng. The key is the youngest son of the Wang family. If not for him, we would have won long ago. Jelifeng said. Now, whenever she thought of that boy, the youngest son of the Wang family, Jelifeng felt like there was a thorn in her back, and she couldn't even swallow her food. In terms of strength, for a strong warrior like Jelifeng, a warrior like Wang Chong was completely like an ant, not even qualified to carry his shoes. If it were any other place, Jelifeng could easily crush him to death. However, what Wang Chong was best at was not martial strength, but the most important thing on the battlefield, the art of war. Moreover, when the two armies fought, the barrier was clear. Wang Chong stood at the top of the mountain, surrounded by an impenetrable wall. Who knew how many experts were protecting him, including Wang Yan and Xin Yuzhongtong. Therefore, no matter how much Uzun and Mengshi Zhao wanted to kill him, even the intelligent Daluan Ruozen couldn't do anything to him. It wasn't that easy to behead the enemy's commander. Don't worry, in the final battle 3 days later, when the Annam Protectorate is completely wiped out, that youngest son of Wang Yan naturally won't be able to escape. Duan Gichuan said calmly. Did you see anything today, General? Zhao Yuofeng hurriedly asked, his heart thumping. Although it hasn't reached the level that your Majesty thinks, it's not far from it. Duan Gichuan nodded. Although the Wang family's attainments in the art of war are unimaginable, even Zhangqiu Jinxiong can't compare to him. However, he isn't the true commander of the Annam Protectorate, and the Annam Protectorate wasn't personally trained by him. To be able to raise the fighting strength of the Annam Protectorate to this level, in such a short time, is already impressive enough. However, there are some flaws that can't be fixed no matter what. Duan Gichuan said calmly. An astonishing light flashed across his eyes, but it quickly dimmed, and everything returned to silence. The tent also returned to silence. This day was equally difficult for Uzun, Mengshi Zhao, and the Tang dynasty. While the commanders of Uzun and Mengshi Zhao were discussing countermeasures, the core commanders of the Tang dynasty were also gathered at the top of the mountain. However, this time, it wasn't just Wang Chong, the Eagle, and Chen Shusan. Even Xin Yuzhongtong, Wang Yan, and Sun Luyue were gathered at the top of the mountain. The 6 of them sat cross-legged on the ground in a circle. In the center was a crude sand table. Around the mountain in the center of the table was a map of the distribution of the Mengshi, Yusang army. Standing on the summit, and looking down from above, it was far too easy to create such a crude sand table. Chong'er, no matter what, reaching this step is already beyond our expectations. Neither I, nor Lord Xinyu will blame you. Wang Yan was the first to break the silence. The casualties had already been reported. In this battle, the Annam Protectorate had suffered significant losses, including the reinforcements from Wang Yan and Wang Chong. They had originally had an army of nearly 100,000. Now they only had 60,000 some left. And this was not the crux of the problem, but the water source. With the Annam Protectorate's water source destroyed, and the gurgling water gushing out like a waterfall, even the slowest of soldiers understood the situation they were in. Lord Wang is correct. No matter what the result is, no matter what the outcome is, we will not blame you. Xin Yuzhongtong also consoled, his voice tinged with understanding. The Annam Protectorate had already been defeated on the shores of the Arai. It was already a miracle that they had been able to delay until now. The army of the southwest was currently beset by both internal and external threats. It was like a dragon trapped in shallow waters in desperate straits. And the existences of Huashu Wuzong, Daluan Ruozen, Jelifeng, and Duongchuan had completely cut off their path of retreat. There was no need to say what awaited the Annam Protectorate. Correct, young master. No matter what, no one will blame you. At the very least, we've already made the Uzin, and Mengshi Zhao pay the price. Sun Luiyue was seated cross-legged on the ground as he spoke. Sun Luiyue was a taciturn man who never liked to speak. For him to say such words, it was clear that this youngest young master of the Wang clan had truly won his respect and approval. No, Father Lord Protector General, I know what you're thinking. But this battle is still far from reaching the level you think it is. At least, not yet. A bright light flashed through Wang Chong's eyes as he suddenly put on a serious expression. Young master, there's no need to comfort us. Chen Shusun couldn't help but say as he patted Wang Chong on the shoulder. Uncle Chen, I'm not joking with you. Wang Chong shook his head, his expression extremely solemn. The words that I said to Daluan Ruozhen were not just for show, Wang Chong said. Buzz! In a flash, the summit was eerily still. Everyone stared at Wang Chong in shock. Chonga, what do you mean? Wang Yin frowned. Not even he, as his father, understood what Wang Chong meant. Could it be that at this stage, there was still room to retaliate? Young master means that we can still defeat them? Sun Luiyue asked in surprise. Although he wasn't particularly skilled in the art of war, he could still tell who was stronger and who was weaker, who was winning and who was losing. In the current situation, the water source had been destroyed. As long as Daluan Ruozhen and the others held their ground, the Annam Protectorate was almost certain to lose. Moreover, the armies of the Tang dynasty were good at fighting on foot, not on horseback. If they abandoned the steel defenses of the mountain and went down the mountain to seek battle, they would be cutting off their own limbs. Uzin's men wouldn't even need 3 days to wipe out the entire army of the Annam Protectorate. Sixth uncle, you've misunderstood me. Wang Chong shook his head. War is never purely a battle between armies, but a continuation of politics. What decides the outcome of a war isn't just the fate on the battlefield, but also the outcome outside the battlefield. The battlefield of the southwest between the Tang dynasty and Uzin and Mengshi Zhao has never been just this one place. At least it's not for me. The group glanced at each other. Let alone Xinyu Zhongtong. Even Wang Yan, his father, was somewhat dumbfounded. He had no idea what Wang Chong was talking about. War was war. To these pure soldiers, war had always been as simple as defeating the opponent in front of them. Everything else had nothing to do with it. As for war is a continuation of politics, not even a veteran general like Wang Yan had ever heard of such a theory, much less anyone else. The group surrounded Wang Chong, wanting to say something, but not knowing where to start. Chapter 610. The Eagle, do you still remember Li Sai? Wang Chong said no more, turning his head to the eagle. Bang! The name Li Sai made the eagle shiver like a bolt of lightning, like the dark clouds in the sky scattering. The eagle seemed to remember something, and his expression became excited. Li Sai. That's right. How could he have forgotten Li Sai? When they had set out from the capital, the young master had far more people at his side. This was the young master's #1 general. Now that he thought about it, before they had even reached the Arai Plains and met up with the old master, Li Sai had led an army and been dispatched by the young master to carry out another mission. But after so many fierce battles and so much time had passed, even he had forgotten about Li Sai's army. Young master, you mean? Wang Chong earnestly nodded. The one with the most schemes wins, and the one with the least loses. Since Uzin has the ambition of a wolf, and wants to use the strength of Mengshi Zhao and Jelifeng to deal with the Tang dynasty, he can't blame me for dealing with him. Since he wants to break off relations with the Tang dynasty, he should be prepared to break off relations. To Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huaitsong, war might only be a battle in front of them, victory or defeat in a decisive battle. But to me, it has never been so. As Wang Chong spoke, his eyes shone with an unprecedented radiance. The Tang dynasty had flaws, the Annam Protectorate had flaws, but did Uzin not have any? Success was due to scoundrels, and failure was due to scoundrels. Daluan Ruozhen had focused all his attention on his own weaknesses, But he had no idea that they also had massive weaknesses, even more severe than his own. It's about time. There should be a result by tonight at the latest. Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Wang Chong stood up, looked towards the west, and said something that no one understood. Strategizing in a tent, deciding victory from 1,000 miles away, whether it was his father or Xin Yuzhongtong. Neither of them understood that the true outcome of this war would not be decided here. It wasn't even determined by this battlefield. Even Dalawan Ruozhen didn't know that he had set up another battlefield for him. In contrast to this battlefield, on another battlefield, Uzun was utterly defeated. As for Dalawan Ruozhen, he still had no idea. War was cruel. This was a fact that every general should know. However, the reality that Wang Chong understood was far crueler than theirs. Li Sai, the rest is up to you. A gentle breeze blew past. Countless thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind, but he eventually calmed down. A sheep was bleeding on the plateau, its eyes filled with confusion. Around it were mountains of rotting corpses of cows and sheep. There were no wounds on the corpses, but there were black spots that indicated that they had died of illness. Black smoke billowed up, burning ceaselessly on the plains. Such a pillar of smoke extended far and near, all the way to the horizon. It was a scene of doomsday. Not far from this sheep, around a ruined tent, a team of black-armored cavalrymen with shining swords and sabers were surveying everything around them. At the very front was a 2-meter-tall giant. He was a head taller than the others, and he appeared exceptionally muscular. He was especially eye-catching. "Sir, this is the 107th batch we've encountered in the past few days. Since 5 days ago, we haven't been able to find any herds of Uzun herdsmen anymore. It looks like we've achieved the desired effect. The plague has already spread throughout the entire Ngari Royal Highlands. What awaits them next is a huge disaster." Behind the muscular man, a cavalryman took 2 steps forward and suddenly said, "You can't bear it?" Li Sai said expressionlessly, as he sat high up on his sturdy Great One divine steed. "Yes." The cavalryman who spoke gritted his teeth and nodded. Behind him, the group of cavalrymen had the same expression. They were all elites who had been selected from the various clans. They were originally prepared for the battlefield for their clans. Although they hadn't entered the army yet, they had already considered themselves to be pure soldiers. If they were fighting on the battlefield, they wouldn't complain even if they died. However, after such a long period of time, what they had been doing was completely different. Even if they were pure warriors who thought highly of themselves, they still wouldn't do such a thing. As elite soldiers, they had only been doing one thing during this period of time, and that was to slaughter cows, sheep, herdsmen, and spread the plague. You guys, are all of you the same?" Li Sai turned around and looked at the elite cavalrymen behind him. Everyone lowered their heads. They had the same thought. "Sir, aren't you the same?" One of the cavalry leaders mustered up his courage and said. Li Sai instantly fell silent. This cavalryman was right. He had indeed doubted it before, and he had also felt a bit of pity. Moreover, unlike the cavalryman behind him, he was not only a regular soldier, but also a general of the regular army. A pure soldier was his definition of himself. But soon Li Sai's eyes became clear. "If it was before, I would definitely think the same as you." Li Sai's voice was loud and clear. His first sentence attracted everyone's attention. "However, have you forgotten who we are? Soldiers. It doesn't matter who you were before. Now that you've entered this place and entered the battlefield, you are soldiers, pure soldiers. You represent others, not yourselves, but the Tang dynasty. Let me ask you, what is the most important thing for a soldier? Is it glory?" The group raised their heads and stared blankly at Li Sai. The most important thing for a soldier, of course, was glory. Was that not the case? "Sir, are you saying something wrong?" another cavalryman asked. Li Sai shook his head, but he remembered what Wang Chong had said to him in the brocade pouch. At that time, he didn't think much of it, and even mocked him. But now Li Sai didn't think like that. "You're wrong. The most important thing for a soldier is to obey orders and be loyal to the Tang dynasty. When each of you steps onto the battlefield, your personal will, your honor and disgrace will become insignificant. If the Tang dynasty fails, Even if you preserve your glory and die gloriously on the battlefield, what's the use? If the territory of the Tang dynasty is occupied by a foreign country, that would be the real shame. Compared to that, what are your feelings now? Li Sai said in a deep voice. His deafening voice stunned everyone. No one would have thought that the person who should have felt the most pity for him would say such words. But there was no one who could refute him. Yes, if a soldier died gloriously on the battlefield, but the war was lost, what meaning was there in the greatest honor? Moreover, the southwest right now, it really had reached the point where Uzun and Mengshi Zhao had invaded the territory of the Tang dynasty. For a moment, everyone was silent. Soldiers, once on the battlefield, should no longer have personal honor or disgrace, personal will, personal gains or losses. None of these thoughts should exist. Our goal has never been personal glory, but to defend the Tang dynasty, to defend the empire behind us. Have you ever thought, if the southwest is lost and Mengshi Zhao and Uzun occupy that place, what sort of scene will you see? What do you think they will do to the people of the Tang dynasty in the southwest? When the time comes, will they show mercy and pay attention to the glory of a soldier? Let me tell you, if we cannot win the war, when you return to the southwest, the scene will be exactly the same as here, and even more wretched. Li Sai's voice grew louder and louder, more and more intense. When the surrounding soldiers heard Li Sai's words, they all raised their heads in shock. They had never seen Li Sai so agitated before, but no one could refute his words. Correct. If this war was lost, the southwest would become a slaughterhouse for Uzun and Mengshi Zhao. Whether it was to establish their own prestige, or to intimidate the people of the southwest into submission, Uzun and Mengshi Zhao would definitely carry out a merciless massacre. And the prolonged war and stalemate with the Annam Protectorate would cause them to vent their anger on the people of the southwest after the war. This was something that everyone understood. In this war, the Tang dynasty had no path of retreat. My lord, a horseman, his face full of shame, prepared to step forward and say something. Suddenly, there was a clatter of hooves as a scout waved a flag and galloped toward them, dust roiling behind him. My lord, the people from the Great Snow Mountain Temple have caught up. Buzz! The atmosphere suddenly changed. Everyone's face revealed a nervous expression. Even the warhorses under them were faintly uneasy and kept sneezing. Everyone looked at Li Sai, who was at the front of the line. They've come so quickly. Li Sai sneered, his expression frigid. In order to deal with the Tang dynasty, Dalawan Ruozan and Huashu Wazong had mobilized all the soldiers that the Ngari royal lineage had accumulated over the past 30 years. As a result, the Ngari royal lineage was currently empty. On the entire plateau, there were only a few herdsmen and scattered tribal warriors. In front of Li Sai and his Wuxia steel elite cavalry, they could not withstand a single blow. In all this time, Li Sai and the others had not encountered any decent resistance. However, the commotion that Li Sai and the others had caused on the Uzun plateau was too great. This was not a war, but an unprecedented disaster. Even the entire Uzun Empire would be severely damaged. The consequences of the plague that Li Sai and the others had spread were so great that even the Great Snow Mountain Temple, which was thousands of miles away, was alarmed and sent out a large number of experts to hunt them down. In the face of these experts from the Great Snow Mountain, even Li Sai did not dare to take them lightly. Therefore, Li Sai had long sent the eagle to monitor them from afar. In addition, he had sent scouts everywhere to spy on them. On the boundless plateau, even the experts from the Great Snow Mountain Temple had nowhere to hide. They would often be discovered by Li Sai and the others from thousands of miles away. Let's go. Li Sai patted the saddle and led the army at a gallop. It's about time to check the next silk sachet. Chapter 611. The news from the highlands came much faster than expected. Prime Minister, the quartermaster has sent word that we've run out of beef and mutton. In the tent, Dalawan Ruozan was deep in thought as he stared at the sand table. Suddenly, an Uzun general rushed in and knelt on one knee. What's going on? Do you need to report such a small matter to me? Dalawan Ruozan turned around and frowned, looking displeased. Won't the Taya tribe send food over? Prime Minister, The Taya tribe hasn't brought any cattle or sheep over for more than half a month. Oh. Dalawan Ruozan finally turned around and asked suspiciously. What about the Luozli tribe? The Uzan did not rely on just one tribe for logistics. There were at least 20 to 30 tribes at a time, and over 100 during times of war. The Luozli tribe hasn't appeared for more than 10 days. What about Dhaka, Raylan and Feki? Dalawan Ruozan reported the names of several tribes. We lost contact with them 8 or 9 days ago. Dalawan Ruozan creased his brow, vaguely sensing that something was wrong. This was not the first time the Uzan and the Tang dynasty had gone to war, and this sort of logistical problem had never happened before. Every tribe in the Uzan knew what food meant to the army. It was every tribe's duty to provide food to the army on time, so the Uzan would never run out of food like the Tang dynasty. It was strange enough for one tribe to fail to provide food to the army on time, but there was definitely a problem with so many tribes failing to keep up. Send someone to the rear to see what's wrong. Dalawan Ruozan's eyebrows twitched as he suddenly had a bad feeling. Report. Dalawan Ruozan didn't have to wait for long. Half an hour later, a messenger rushed into the tent in a panic. Prime Minister, we've just received news from the highlands. An army of the Tang dynasty has rushed to the highlands and started a massacre. They've even spread a plague. Now all the tribes on the highlands have suffered heavy casualties. Countless cattle and sheep have died. The herald knelt on the ground with his head lowered. He didn't even dare to look at Dalawan Ruozan. Large beads of sweat seeped out of his forehead and dripped down. What? Dalawan Ruozan's body shook violently. He grabbed the messenger and shook him violently. What nonsense are you talking about? How could such a thing happen? Prime Minister, it's true. A member of the Jaeger tribe escaped from the plateau. I've already confirmed it with him over and over again. There is no doubt about it. The herald knelt on the ground. His face was pale, but his voice was incomparably firm. Every word was incomparably clear. Those people killed their way into the highlands more than half a month ago. Moreover, they've sent people to seal off the passage down from the highlands. No news can be sent out at all. All the tribesmen who wanted to send news died on the mountain path. He only managed to escape with great difficulty. More than half a month ago, Dalawan Ruozan's heart sank. Didn't that mean that the Annam Protectorate led by Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong was still trapped in Lion City? Wang Chong. In a flash, a thought flashed through Dalawan Ruozan's mind. He subconsciously thought of the young figure at the peak of the opposite mountain. If Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong were both trapped in Lion City, then the only one who could do all this was Wang Chong. Dalawan Ruozan's heart suddenly turned cold. He took advantage of a loophole. More than half a month ago, Dalawan Ruozan's heart was still only Lion City and the Annam Protectorate inside. Meanwhile, the tens of thousands of reinforcements led by Li Zhengyi in the north had already been defeated by the army led by Huoshu Wuzong. On the road south, there were layers of Uzan cavalry guarding it. Dalawan Ruozan had never imagined that Wang Chong would break through the Uzan's defensive line at this time, and even send an army to kill their way into the highlands. The one who laughs in the end, laughs the best. Dalawan Ruozan's entire body turned cold. The only thing left in his mind was Wang Chong's last words. Following that, more and more details were dug out. Dalawan Ruozan's face grew paler and paler, his expression more and more unsightly. The situation on the highlands was much more serious and terrifying than he had imagined. Sheep plague. Dalawan Ruozan had never imagined that Wang Chong would use this method to deal with him. Not against people, but against the cows and sheep on the highlands. No one on the highlands would die from this sheep plague, but Dalawan Ruozan would rather Wang Chong deal with his own army. The people on the highlands could not do without beef and mutton for 3 meals a day. Even the highland barley was eaten with beef and mutton. Furthermore, unlike the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains, the cows and sheep of the Uzan were raised in large herds. Each tribe had hundreds of thousands, or even millions of cows. Once a plague broke out, it would be an unimaginable disaster. Prime Minister! Prime Minister! A voice sounded near and far. Dalawan Ruozan shook his head and suddenly woke up. When he opened his eyes, the messenger was still kneeling on the ground, motionless and in the same position as before. Got it. You may leave. Someone, inform King Mengshi Zhao that I have a request. At a time like this, the only thing Daluan Ruozhen could think of was Mengshi Zhao and Jelifeng. Mengshi Zhao and the Tang dynasty were of the same lineage. If there was someone who could solve the crisis on the highlands, then Daluan Ruozhen could only think of Jelifeng. What? Plague? Bonfires blazed in Mengshi Zhao's camp. The torches illuminated the people in the tents clearly. After hearing the reason for Daluan Ruozhen's visit, Jelifeng's eyes were filled with shock. Even a mighty ruler like Jelifeng would never have thought that such a thing would happen on the Uzhen highlands. Someone actually thought of attacking the hinterlands of Uzhen and invading the highlands at this time. This news was like a slap to everyone's face. Wang Chong's military strategy was unconstrained and marvelous. It had already surpassed everyone's imagination. Great Minister, I understand what you mean. No matter what, as an ally, I will do my best to help you. However, our Mengshi Zhao people mainly rely on rice, and we also eat pork. We don't have many cows or sheep to begin with, so plagues are even rarer. Therefore, when I first learned medicine from the Tang dynasty, this kind of unorthodox prescription for sheep plague was not on the list of things I learned. Not only that, I did not learn any of these unorthodox prescriptions. Jelifeng tried her best to be tactful. In fact, Jelifeng could be sure that even in the Tang dynasty, it was definitely not easy to find a veterinarian who could treat sheep plague. This kind of sheep plague was really too rare among the farming people. Understood. Then, Daluan Ruozhen thanks Your Majesty in advance. Daluan Ruozhen said, Your Majesty, bad news. The people of Uzhen are fighting with our people. Just as the two were talking, a messenger from Mengshi Zhao suddenly rushed in anxiously. Shua. In an instant, everyone's eyes turned to look at him. The food shortage in Uzhen had finally caused a problem. Under the stimulation of hunger, the people of Uzhen, who were known for their ferocity and belligerence, naturally turned their attention to their fellow allies, the people of Mengshi Zhao. Due to the language barrier, a fight quickly broke out between the two sides. When Jelifeng and Daluan Ruozhen arrived, the commotion was quickly quelled. However, everyone knew that this was just the beginning. Young master, they really are fighting. At the top of the mountain, a long flagpole danced in the wind. Under the flagpole, the eagle and Wang Chong stood together, looking down the mountain. The eagle's face was full of joy, while Wang Chong was silent. Young master, it seems that Li Sai's strategy is really working. The eagle looked at Wang Chong said beside him. The eagle knew everything about Li Sai. Wang Chong had said earlier that if a fight broke out between Uzhen and Mengshi Zhao, it meant that the people of Uzhen were running low on food. In other words, Li Sai's operation behind their backs had been a complete success. Wang Chong nodded. In the night wind, the two strands of hair at his temples danced incessantly. In the dark of the night, they had already stood here for a long time. From the top of the mountain, they had already seen at least 17 fights in the light of the fire. To say that nothing had happened between Uzhen and Mengshi Zhao, Wang Chong would never believe it. War is cruel. Now it's up to Daluan Ruozhen to make his choice. The Annam Protectorate had been forced into a desperate situation due to the water problem. Now the morale of the army was dropping. Wang Chong could clearly feel this change. But now, without a sufficient supply of cattle and sheep, the people of Uzhen were running low on food. They were in the same situation as the Annam Protectorate. Now there was no longer an advantage. It all depended on who could last longer. Young master, do the people of Uzhen really not eat rice? If it's just food, with the wealth of Mengshi Zhao, they can definitely provide a lot of food. The eagle suddenly thought of something and frowned. That's impossible. Wang Chong laughed. The eating habits of the people of Uzhen aren't that easy to change. For example, if you only eat meat for 3 meals a day and don't eat rice, can you get used to it? Also, unlike us, the people of Uzhen don't have the habit of growing rice. In other words, they have never eaten rice before. But doesn't Mengshi Zhao still have pork? If it's just meat, can't pork be used as a substitute? Old Eagle hesitated for a moment. There are so many people in Uzhen. 3 meals a day. How many pigs do you think Mengshi Zhao keeps? It's just a drop in the bucket, Wang Cheng said calmly. The eagle was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. That's right. Pigs were different from cattle and sheep. Cattle and sheep could be left to graze freely in the wild, but no one would raise pigs like that. Therefore, the number of pigs would always be far less than cattle and sheep. With the wealth of the Tang dynasty, ordinary people could barely eat pork for a few meals a month, let alone Meng Shizhao. Meng Shizhao's habit of raising pigs was far from the Tang dynasty. Even if they could barely provide for Meng Shizhao, how much could they provide? For how long? Chapter 6:12. Wang Cheng only smiled. The eagle had clearly understood. In this campaign to the south, Wang Cheng had carefully considered and researched every one of his strategies. If he had not been certain that the sheep plague would be effective, he would never have made such an arrangement. Turning around, Wang Cheng slowly vanished from the summit. Although Li Sai's surprise army had been effective, the Mengshi, Yusang army had not retreated. As long as the problem of water was not resolved, Wang Cheng would not be able to relax. No one could help him in this matter. The imperial court could not help him, nor could Su Yiqin. No one could help him. He could only rely on himself to think of a solution. Let me tell you, my words are in order. If I say that you're not allowed to get close to the people of the Wang clan, then you're not allowed to get close to them. If you don't listen to my advice, be careful that I don't become merciless. The palm of a middle-aged man slammed heavily on the table with great force. Wang Cheng could never have imagined that while he was in trouble in the southwest, in the distant capital Su Yiqin, the future king of logistics that Wang Cheng had predicted, was also in trouble. By the way, I've already ordered for those people sent by the Wang clan to be driven out. You're forbidden from leaving for 3 months. The middle-aged man had a stern expression, the veins on his forehead bulging. It was clear that he was in a state of rage. Big uncle, Su Yiqin raised her head to look at the middle-aged man, her expression as cold as ice. The matter between me and the Wang clan is my personal matter. It has nothing to do with the Su clan, and it has nothing to do with you. Don't meddle in my business. Bastard thing. Even at a time like this, you're still saying such things. Su Henian was infuriated, his hand raised and ready to strike. You dare. Su Yiqin was unafraid. She was not her big uncle's person. No matter what, today's matter had gone too far. Su Zhongnian, look at the fine daughter you raised. King Qi has already visited twice. Han and Rong were stripped of their official titles because of you. Su Zhongnian, is this daughter of yours trying to destroy our Su family? Su Henian suddenly turned his head and harshly cursed the ashamed middle-aged man behind him. This person was naturally Su Yiqin's father, second master Su Zhongnian, as well as Su Henian's second brother. Although they were both stewards of the Su clan, Su Zhongnian's personality was the complete opposite of Su Henian's. Su Zhongnian hadn't learned the slightest bit of the Su clan's abilities. He hadn't been able to help the clan in the slightest, but he had caused quite a few disasters and slip-ups back then. If she hadn't given birth to a daughter, Su Yiqin, she wouldn't even be able to sit in her position. Qiner, listen to your uncle. The Wang clan isn't related to us in any way. There's no need to offend His Imperial Highness Prince Qi for them. Su Zhongnian looked at his daughter, his voice soft and almost pleading. Big uncle, you dare speak of King Qi? Su Qiqin paid no attention to her father, Su Zhongnian. Instead, she turned to her big uncle Su Henian. If you still don't know, many of the Su clan's descendants have been inexplicably stripped of their official titles, or kicked out of the Bureau of Revenue, Bureau of Personnel, and Bureau of Agriculture. All of our Su clan's power is here. Do you know what this means? Not only that, 10 of the clan's 18 major trade routes have been severed, and 23 of the 68 branch trade routes have been severed. Have you looked at the clan's accounts? In just this month, the clan's income has shrunk, and it's still dropping. All of our income isn't even 40% of what it used to be. How many people does the Su clan have? Do you think that the daily expenses and the various trade routes don't need to be spent? Such a large clan can't even stop for a single day. You've actually reduced it by 60%. Take a look at these accounts for yourself. As Su Hinian spoke, he took out a large stack of accounts from his sleeve and slammed them down in front of Su Yiqin. Our Su clan rose to prominence during the Sui dynasty. We experienced the fires of war and the various political storms of the imperial court. It was not easy for us to reach this day. We have truly experienced all sorts of tribulations. Do you not know what kind of person King Qi is? So now, do you really want to destroy our Su clan for the sake of an outsider? Su Hinian's eyes blazed with fury, making no attempt to conceal his emotions. At any other time, the entire Su clan would have wanted nothing more than to pamper this proud daughter of the Su clan. Moreover, she was doted on by the old master. But this time he had gone too far. Han'er and Rong'er were his two most beloved sons, and also the ones he had placed the greatest hopes on. In order for them to enter the Bureau of Personnel and Bureau of Revenue, he had paid an enormous price. But in a single day, for no reason at all, they had been stripped of their official titles and kicked out of the Bureau of Personnel and Bureau of Revenue. One could easily imagine the fury in Su Hinian's heart. Su Yiqin said nothing, only solemnly picked up the Su clan's account books and began to flip through them one by one. She had always been intelligent and had long since begun to examine the clan's accounts for her father. She was no stranger to these things. Time slowly passed. Su Hinian stood to the side, his face ashen, while Su Yiqin's father, Su Zhongnian, wore an uneasy expression. Su Qiqin was the only one who slowly flipped through the account book. Slowly, Su Yiqin's complexion grew more and more grave. How could this be? This is too despicable. Su Yiqin's complexion was pale, her entire body trembling. Her big uncle had said that 10 of the Su clan's 18 major trade routes had been severed, and 23 of the 68 branch trade routes had been severed. Their income had been reduced by 60%, but Su Yiqin was skilled in accounting. She discovered that the situation was even more serious than her big uncle had described. These accounts involved at least 11 major sales contracts, all of which were recorded in the Court of Judicial Review. If they were breached, the Su clan would have to pay an enormous price. This involved millions of taels of gold. Not only that, the Su clan's accounts clearly showed that someone had tampered with them. This matter could be concealed from others, from her big uncle, but not from Su Yiqin. Su Yiqin smelled the thick scent of a conspiracy. There was no doubt that someone was planning to move against the Su clan. And the only person Su Yiqin could think of was King Qi. How about it? You have nothing else to say, right? Let me tell you, in 3 months, if you dare to walk out of this gate and have any dealings with the Wang clan, don't blame me for turning my back on you. When the time comes, the clan will be enraged, and not even the old master will be able to save you. Su Hinian saw that Su Yiqin's complexion had turned pale, and knew that his words had an effect. Throwing down these words, he flicked his sleeve and left. Su Zhongnian glanced at his daughter, gave a long sigh, and turned to leave the room. Only Su Yiqin was left standing in front of the window, stunned and speechless. Walala! The moment Su Hinian and Su Zhongnian left, a flapping of wings came from outside the window. A sliver of clarity returned to Su Yiqin's eyes. Raising her head, she saw that a gray messenger pigeon had at some point landed on the open window lattice. On the pigeon's leg was a familiar golden leggings, but unlike usual, there was a thin red string tied to the golden leggings. This is, Su Qiqin's expression changed slightly when she saw the thin red string that had appeared. In the agreed signal, this was a signal that would only appear in an emergency. Su Yiqin undid the leggings and quickly opened the message. A line of words immediately entered her eyes. It was a simple sentence, but it made Su Qiqin's heart sink. Big Uncle, King Qi. Plagued from within and without, countless pressures surged at her. In all her life, Su Yiqin had never encountered such a situation. On one side was the clan that had raised her, and on the other side was Wang Chong, who had trusted her and entrusted his life to her. Su Yiqin had to make a choice. Su Yiqin's heart was racked with agony. She knew that King Qi would not give her too much time. Young miss, what do we do? Are we really going to offend King Qi for Wang Chong and send our clan to its doom? The delicate maid Huan Yin who had been serving Su Yiqin this entire time, worriedly said. She knew of her young Mrs. feelings for Wang Chong, but the nature of this time was different. King Qi was an imperial prince of the Tang dynasty, and his influence in and out of the court was deeply rooted. The Su clan could not afford to offend him. As a logistician family, the basic way to protect themselves was to build a good relationship with the royal family, not to antagonize them. In the past, there had been too many such examples. Yen you can leave first. I need some peace and quiet. Su Yiqin slumped back into her chair. She rested her forehead on one hand and remained motionless. For the first time, a trace of haggard expression appeared on that icy and beautiful face. Splash! Large streams of cold spring water poured out of the water bags without any hesitation. The Tibetan soldiers at the base of the mountain were even laughing heartily as they used the drinking water to wash their highland steeds and their armor. Large amounts of clear water flowed to the ground and even converged into small streams. Ha ha ha, so comfortable. Meng Shizhao's cavalry carried buckets of water and poured it over their heads. This scene played out at the foot of the mountain every day from morning to night. But every evening, the water on the ground would be buried or sprinkled with poison, leaving no chance for the Annam Protectorate. On the mountain range, a restless atmosphere was pervading. Young master, Dalawan Ruozan is too despicable. He knows that we lack water, so he sends people to the foot of the mountain every day to disturb the army with water. If this continues, I'm afraid we will collapse without a fight. Chapter 613. The Annam Protectorate's water shortage was already quite serious. Dalawan Ruozan's surprise attack was effective. On the same day, Wang Chong's army ran out of water. Now even high-ranking generals like Luoji had rough skin and cracked lips. It was obvious how serious the Annam Protectorate's water shortage was. The Annam Protectorate had less than a tenth of its original number of stoves, and the war horses drinking water was restricted to the limit. The morale of the army had long fallen. Everyone was panicking. At this time, Dalawan Ruozan still used drinking water to disturb the Annam Protectorate. Although this move is simple, it's quite effective. We don't have a good solution at all. The eagle looked at the foot of the mountain worriedly. The Tang dynasty's water shortage was no secret. Even the low-ranking soldiers knew that there was not much water left in the barracks. Every day, Dalawan Ruozan would have people come to the front of the formation and wantonly use water to bathe and wash the horses, provoking everyone. They were already severely dehydrated. Under such circumstances, everyone felt their lips becoming increasingly dry and cracked. Their hearts were getting more and more thirsty. This was a completely uncontrollable instinctive reaction. Even though everyone knew that this was a battle of life and death, they still had this uncontrollable reaction. The eagle could feel the restlessness even from the top of the mountain. One could imagine how they felt. Kill the horses, Wang Chong suddenly said. What? The eagle was stunned. He couldn't react in time. Kill some of the war horses and use their blood to temporarily quench our thirst. This is the only expedient for now, Wang Chong said in a low voice. But without the war horses, what will happen to young master's plan? Moreover, the Annam Protectorate doesn't have many war horses now. The eagle was stunned. He never expected Wang Chong to suddenly suggest such a strategy. In the previous battles, the mountaintop cavalry that Wang Chong had set aside had played a huge role. It could even be said that they had played a key role in turning the tide of the battle. Fen Jie had led Meng Shizhao's most elite Dragon Sun Corps, and had almost pierced through the Tang dynasty's defensive lines, killing their way to the summit. In the end, it was Wang Chong's cavalry who used a surprise attack to seize an opening and cut off the Dragon Sun Corps from the front to the back, breaking his edge. More than a third of the Phoenix Sun Corps had died in battle, and even Fen Jie had almost died on the mountain. If it wasn't for his subordinates escorting him as he fled for his life. Without war horses, the Tang dynasty would lose a lot of room to maneuver. Just kill some of them. Every day that he could delay was one day at a time. Now they were competing to see who could last longer. Pass down the order. Now, the daily consumption is calculated by the drop. Unless it's absolutely necessary, you absolutely can't waste a single drop of water. Wang Chong said. For an army of 60,000 to be supplied with water by the drop every day, this was simply unimaginable for a regular army. But right now there was no other way. If it were in the past, this sort of thing would absolutely cause a massive panic. But now, after Dalawan Ruozen's incessant embellishment, there was actually nothing to worry about. This could be considered a wrong move. This subordinate understands. The eagle nodded. In addition, Dalawan Ruozen's current situation isn't any better than ours. Under the banner, Wang Chong looked across from him and suddenly laughed. Dalawan Ruozen had done his best, pouring pot after pot, bag after bag, bucket after bucket at the base of the mountain in front of all the Annam Protectorate soldiers, washing horses, bathing. But in his own situation, Wang Chong didn't even need to do anything, didn't need to imitate him, and it was already chaotic enough. There was a shortage of water, so he just had to conserve a little. Previously, he used to take 1 bag a day, but now he took 5 or 6 drops twice a day. 7 or 8 drops was enough, and he could endure it for a while. But without beef and mutton, what if he couldn't get used to the food of farming tribes? Ask people who ate beef and mutton every day to eat rice? Eat vegetables? That was what they called grass. Anyone else might have been able to endure. But Uzun was famed for his viciousness, courage, and belligerence. He wasn't the sort of person who could control his temper. Standing at the top of the mountain and looking down, the front of the formation was completely calm. But the rear of the Mengshi, Yusang army was in chaos. Even at this distance, Wang Chong could still hear the clamor. In a single day, Wang Chong had seen 17 or 18 fights, all of them between Mengshi, Yusang soldiers. Wang Chong could easily guess that Uzun's men were running low on food, so they had definitely turned their attention to Uzun's men. After all, Mengshi, Yusang were nominally allies, and Uzun had only sent soldiers for Mengshi Zhao's sake. Alas, the two sides didn't speak the same language, so this became pure and unreasonable quarreling, intentionally finding fault with each other, and even starting to fight. The gap between them only grew deeper and deeper. If this continued, Wang Chong wouldn't even need to do anything to see the Mengshi, Yusang army begin to wear each other down and suffer heavy casualties. Dalawan Ruozen, no matter how monstrously intelligent you are, you still couldn't have imagined this. If you want to deal with the Tang dynasty, you'll have to pay the price. No matter what, Uzun will never be the victor. Wang Chong quietly said to himself as he looked into the distance. I need to calm down for a bit. The eagle, I'll leave this place to you. With these words, Wang Chong turned and vanished from the summit. At the base of the mountain, in his tent, Dalawan Ruozen's situation was far more serious than Wang Chong had imagined. Letter after letter flew into Dalawan Ruozen's hands like snowflakes. On the first day, countless war horses and spies were traveling back and forth between the plateau and the Tang dynasty's southwest. A plague of unprecedented proportions was currently breaking out on the plateau. Hundreds of thousands, even millions of cattle and sheep were falling to the ground in large swaths. Although cattle and sheep were the staple food of the Uzun people, once they were infected with the plague, they could no longer be used as food. And if they ate infected cattle or sheep, even humans would die of the disease, and there was no way to treat them. Dalawan Ruozen had only sent several 100,000 soldiers to besiege the plateau, forcing Wang Chong and the Tang people into a state of thirst. But Wang Chong had plunged most of the steppe into a famine. The plague was currently spreading from the Ngari royal lineage to the entire plateau. Its effects were so great that even the Tsimpo had been alarmed. Right now, the Tsimpo had mobilized a large number of soldiers to intercept the Ngari royal lineage and kill all the wandering cattle and sheep. Even the great general who was locked in battle with Geshu Han had been pulled out of the army. From this, one could easily imagine the severity of this matter. But even so, there was no guarantee that no fish would escape the net. The more Dalawan Ruozen looked at the documents on the table, the more alarmed he became. If not for the fact that the war for the southwest had reached a critical juncture, and it was hard to get off a tiger if you rode it, he would have long since led the army back. This son of the Wang clan, Daluan Ruozhen clenched his fists, the veins on his forehead bulging. As the wise minister of the Ngari royal lineage, Daluan Ruozhen had always held a feather fan in his hand. He had always given the impression of a cultured and refined man who rarely got angry, but this matter had completely surpassed the limits of what Daluan Ruozhen could accept. Wantonly spreading a plague across the steppe, poisoning and killing tens of thousands of cattle and sheep, turning the entire steppe into a land of plague. If one did not know about this matter, they would find it very difficult to imagine that a youth not even 17 years of age could do such a thing. Daluan Ruozhen had always believed that Wang Chong had some talent, but lacked experience in the art of war. Only now did he realize that this youth on the mountain possessed a heart even colder and more frightening than he had imagined. "Have you found those some elite cavalry?" Daluan Ruozhen asked. Replying to Prime Minister, "They come and go without a trace, and they are extremely strong. The tribal herdsmen of the plateau are simply incapable of stopping them. Moreover, their weapons are also very sharp. When our weapons touch them, they easily break." A messenger had been kneeling at the entrance to the tent for some time. "Sharp?" Daluan Ruozhen closed his eyes, vaguely recalling something. "By the way, Prime Minister, the experts of the Great Snow Mountain Temple are already tracking them." The messenger raised his head and said as he recalled something. "Got it." Daluan Ruozhen raised his head and looked at the top of the tent, but his expression did not change in the slightest. After such a long time, the cavalry still had not been dealt with. Obviously, they had found a way to get rid of the people of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Moreover, this terrible disaster had already spread across the plateau. What awaited Uzun would be a disaster that would last for years, decades, or even decades. Right now, the plateau was already a hell. The damage had already been done, and it was already too late to say anything. "Pass down my order, block the news. Before the war ends, don't let anyone know about what happened on the plateau." Daluan Ruozhen closed his eyes and said, his clothes trembling. In his decades as a prime minister, this was the first time he had been forced to this point. "Yes, Prime Minister," the messenger replied. The messenger in the tent responded. When he got up, his body paused for a moment, but he quickly stood up. "Speak. What did you find?" Daluan Ruozhen asked without raising his head. "Prime Minister, if that kid on the summit, he can speak our language of Uzun." The messenger gathered his courage and looked at the great minister in the tent, his eyes full of worry. That son of the Wang clan was the instigator of all this. This was the best time for him to spread the news. "Impossible," Daluan Ruozhen denied without hesitation. He raised his head and closed his eyes, making it impossible to discern the slightest emotion on his face. Even though he's the one who spread the plague, if he's a smart person, he won't say anything. No one will believe him either. Many people knew that the logistics of the Uzun army had encountered a problem, but no one could have guessed that this was related to the unprecedented plague on the plateau. Chapter 614. "You can leave. Let me have some peace and quiet," Daluan Ruozhen said. The tent was empty, but a young figure had clearly appeared before Daluan Ruozhen's eyes. At this moment, he was keenly aware that on the other side of the mountain, there was someone just like him, their brows tightly shut, suffering from the same vexation, unable to sleep. In these few decades, Zhangqiu Jinxiong had been no match for him, and neither had Xinyu Zhongtong. Daluan Ruozhen had never imagined that just when he had the absolute advantage in numbers, he would encounter the most valiant foe he had ever encountered. In this battle, it was already foreordained that there would be no victor. It was just a matter of who would lose more miserably. "Huishu, we won't lose." "Absolutely not, right?" Daluan Ruozhen didn't even raise his head as he spoke to Huishu Huaitsong, who had appeared behind him at some point, a rare hint of exhaustion in his voice. "Relax, we won't lose." "Absolutely not. I will always believe in you." Hidden in the shadows, Huishu Huaizong pressed a broad and powerful palm against Daluan Ruozhen's shoulder. The southwest of the empire finally welcomed a rare moment of peace under the assault of Wang Chong and Daluan Ruozhen. But for the Tang dynasty and the surrounding powers, This was destined to be an uneasy moment of peace. The tigers devouring the dragon and overthrowing the Tang dynasty had begun with Mengshi Zhao and Uzun in the southwest. That was the beginning of everything, and it was also destined to be the end. Victory or defeat in that place would determine the outcome of the entire war. The Goguryeo Empire, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, the Abbasid Caliphate, Karakspazynu, countless eyes were watching that place. Every day, countless pigeons flew out of the southwest. Sir, Uzun's army seems to have been reduced by a lot. In Longxi of the Tang dynasty, traces of the flames of war could be seen everywhere. Desolation and scars could be seen everywhere. On top of a dilapidated Big Dipper city, a high-ranking captain of the Big Dipper army gazed at the tall plateau across from him and suddenly cried out. Longxi had been embroiled in a bitter battle for a long time. Since the start of the battle, this was the first time Uzun's side had such a sign. At the top of Big Dipper city, Geshu Han stood motionlessly on the city walls. He had fair skin and a handsome face. Even though he was already past his 30s, he still possessed an astonishing temperament and charm. However, Geshu Han's ability to suppress the western border and become the Big Dipper Great General of the Great Tang had never been due to his appearance, but his formidable strength and superb grasp of the art of war. Geshu Han exuded an extremely sharp aura. Just by standing on the walls, he was like an unsheathed saber, standing guard over the city walls and blocking wave after wave of attacks from the Uzun. But not even Geshu Han could understand this change in the Uzun. Uitadra Konglo was the king of generals of the Uzun, his status above that of Huashu Wuzong and Dusong Mengpoch. Logically speaking, this sort of mistake should not have occurred. There's a problem on the plateau. As Geshu Han was furrowing his brow in thought, a heavy, mellow, and dignified voice came from behind him. Behind the city gate tower, a middle-aged man dressed in court attire and wearing a jade python belt, with a square face and an honest look on his face, appeared to be extremely wise and far-sighted. Although his appearance was gentle and his facial features were not particularly handsome, this middle-aged man exuded an aura as boundless as the sea. Geshu Han was the Big Dipper Great General, presiding over the western border and possessing peerless strength, but he was still a head lower than this middle-aged man. Teacher. Geshu Han's expression flickered, and he excitedly bowed in respect. Geshu Han's status as the Big Dipper Great General meant that only the Crown Prince's junior guardian, the former commander of the Big Dipper army, the war god of the Tang dynasty, Wang Zhongxi, could make him lower his head and call his teacher. In the Tang dynasty, everyone knew that Geshu Han had once been Wang Zhongxi's subordinate and had been promoted by Wang Zhongxi. It was precisely because of Wang Zhongxi that he had reached his current level. But very few people knew that the relationship between Geshu Han and Wang Zhongxi was far from that of an ordinary subordinate and commanding officer. In truth, Geshu Han had been raised single-handedly by Wang Zhongxi. Rather than saying that Geshu Han was Wang Zhongxi's subordinate, it would be better to say that Geshu Han was Wang Zhongxi's student. In private, in Longxi, Geshu Han had never addressed Wang Zhongxi as lord, but as teacher. He had long ago learned that the Crown Prince's junior guardian Wang Zhongxi had left the capital, but Geshu Han had not expected Wang Zhongxi to arrive so quickly. In the face of a major war, Uitadra Konglo will not easily mobilize his troops, unless something unexpected happens on the plateau. A gentle breeze blew as Wang Zhongxi stood on top of the city gate tower. He gazed at the fluttering war flag in the distance, as well as the white warhorse beneath it. In terms of understanding of Uzun and Uitadra Konglo, no one understood it better than Wang Zhongxi. The two of them had always been formidable foes. Alas, Uitadra Konglo had still lost to Wang Zhongxi by a single move. High primordial transformation? Geshu Han slightly creased his brow. Because of the unique geography of the plateau, Uzun could be considered the most comfortable country outside of the Tang dynasty. Other than the Tang dynasty, which had fought its way to the plateau several times in its wars with Uzun, no other faction had been able to invade the plateau. The plateau's unique geography and altitude made it difficult to breathe, and outsiders simply could not stay there for too long. With such a comfortable geography, what problems could the Uzan Empire have? Have you investigated the southwest? Wang Zhongxi suddenly asked, a profound look on his face. The southwest. Upon hearing these two words, Geshu Han froze, a trace of astonishment flashing across his handsome face. In the southwest of the Tang dynasty, the 180,000 soldiers of the Annam Protectorate had been defeated, and Li Jingyi's tens of thousands of reinforcements had been ambushed and defeated by Huashu Wuzong. Geshu Han had long ago received this news. The southwest was currently in a state of complete collapse. Could there still be a chance for the southwest to turn? I heard that a lion city has appeared in the southwest, Wang Zhongxi slowly said as he looked into the distance. Oh. Geshu Han slightly creased his brow as he glanced at Wang Zhongxi, and then at the southwest, a pensive look on his face. Good news, Huangfu's Weibo has been opened. If you want to know how I'm doing, you're welcome to follow me. Carrot. How can a puny Annam Protectorate without Zhangqiu Jinxiong standing guard be so firm? In a massive tent on the vast steppe, a bearded and bare-chested Turkic man impatiently remarked, as he ate a fragrant roast leg of lamb. Great Khan, Dalawan Ruozan and Huashu Wuzong have met their match this time. More than 300,000 Uzan cavalry, and several 100,000 Mengshi Zhao soldiers, have been trapped on a small mountain, unable to break through. The Western Turkic prince of the left virtuous said. His aura was vast and boundless, as vast as the mountains and seas. Oh, is the Annam Protectorate that formidable? Didn't they say that they only have less than 100,000 soldiers? Could it be that Xinyu Zhongtong has such talent? No, Great Khan. I hear that it's a child called Wang Chong who's particularly skilled in the art of war. Before Mengshi Zhao and the Tang dynasty even began fighting, he built the Lion City on the Arai Plains. And he's currently in command of the Annam Protectorate. Oh, Osmish Kagan put down the leg of lamb in his hand, a grave look finally appearing in his eyes. Great Khan, the Tang dynasty is still our enemy. Should we help them now? The prince of the left virtuous probed. The tent was deathly still, the only sound being emitted by the flickering of the fire. The Western Turkic Khaganate was currently doing its utmost to attract the armies of the Tang dynasties, Biting Protectorate, and Qixi Protectorate. If they wanted to help Mengshi Zhao and Uzan, it meant it was very quiet in the tent. No one spoke. We'll do as you say. After a long while, Osmish Kagan finally nodded. In addition, investigate that Wang Chong. I want to know everything there is to know about him. The Eastern Turkic Khaganate, Goguryeo, the Abbasid Caliphate, Karax-Spazinu. The Tang dynasty's prolonged war in the southwest had attracted everyone's attention. No one had expected that, without Zhangqiu Jinxiong, the Annam Protectorate would be able to hold out for so long against the frenzied assaults of Jelifeng and Dalawan Ruozan. Each empire was taking their own actions to help Mengshi Zhao and Uzan. Some empires had begun to send soldiers to instigate small-scale battles, while others had begun to think of ways to directly assist Uzan and Mengshi Zhao. The night wind blew. It was already the second day after the armistice. Wang Chong sat cross-legged by himself beneath the banner fluttering high in the sky. His brow was creased, and there was a hint of worry in his expression. Wang Chong rarely revealed his true thoughts in front of his subordinates. Only when he was alone would he reveal his true thoughts. In the darkness, Wang Chong's gaze slowly swept over the surface of the mountain, over the dense ranks of soldiers at the foot of the mountain. An almost imperceptible hint of worry appeared in his eyes. This was an army with strict discipline. This was also an army that had experienced many trials. There was no better army in the southwest, because this was also the last army in the southwest. But at this moment, Wang Chong sensed a rare hint of exhaustion from this army. Dalawan Ruozan's surprise attack had been effective. The problem of water was currently plaguing Wang Chong and the Annam Protectorate. A person could go 3 days without eating, but a person could not go 3 days without drinking water. The army's water supply had pretty much been used up yesterday. After today, there would not be a drop of water left on the mountain. Even the blood of the horses had been used up. Because of the extreme lack of water, the entire Annam Protectorate was in a state of parched mouths and easily fatigued. Although the war had ended 2 days ago, the army was even more fatigued than before. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.